Come along, sing our song, join the jamboree. M-I-C-K-E-Y. Oh my fucking god, I can't believe it's been 100 years since the founding of the Walt Disney Animation Studio. I know it shouldn't be a big surprise, but it's just astounding how long this giant conglomerate has lasted, bringing millions and millions of kids, families, and other people incredible memories, very much including yours truly. I've been around Disney literally my entire life, with the first movie I've ever watched being the original Toy Story, my first theater experience that I remember being Monsters Inc., and then growing up with almost every Disney and Pixar movie up to the 2010s. My grandparents had a cornucopia of Disney films on VHS and DVD, our family having a few here and there, and the guests were filled with family friends and other family members. Now, if I remember correctly, the only animated movies I didn't really grow up with were Melody Time, Make My Music, The Great Mouse Detective, The Rescuers Down Under, Fantasia 2000, and Atlantis. I think that's about it. There are a few direct-to-DVD sequels I didn't watch, and the only live-action movies I remember watching a few times were Mary Poppins, Pete's Dragon, and, believe it or not, Song of the South. I'm not even kidding, we actually have a DVD of that movie, and I'm not even sure why. And if we got into the other studios and properties they acquired over the years, like Pixar obviously, Marvel, Star Wars, Lucasfilm in general, Muppets, ESPN, Fox, we'd be here all day, so for this video we're just gonna focus on Disney themselves. And of course when video games became a trend, they had to hop all over that. So much to the point where they actually developed their own studio just to make all those video games. For a while, at least. While we didn't get any adaptations until the mid-80s, don't misunderstand, Disney were going to make games based on their old movies eventually. They were going to make games based on Snow White and Dumbo on the Atari 2600, and while prototypes did surface on the internet, I feel no obligation to try them. Also, Snow White broke my eardrums, so fuck it in hell. Also, is this one of the dwarves? Because I don't remember any of them having curves like those. Put those pants back on. But even with those excluded, there are still over 60 games on the list, more than 100 if you count ports and differing versions. And many movies have more than one game tied to them. And you got it right, I'm playing all of them. Any game based on any of the Walt Disney Animated Studio movies, that's what I'm going to be talking about. I could include stuff from Pixar, the Mickey Mouse platformers, the Disney Afternoon games, etc, etc, but I got enough to worry about, and also I don't need to play Mickey's Mousecapade. Ugh. And yeah, I am familiar with some of these games, though I haven't owned a single one of them. Only sampled them here and there, so for the most part, it's gonna be a blind adventure throughout. Also, I'm going to avoid any mobile and LCD games, mostly because there aren't any easy ways to play them anymore. And also, again, there are over 100 games to talk about anyway. Lastly, none of the Disney Princess games. My patience can only go so far. So we get to start off with Sorcerer's Apprentice on the Atari 2600, based on the short of the same name from Fantasia. This was one of those movies I watched over and over again. It's just a phenomenal visual treat, something that even made me want to get into animation myself. And fun fact, this is the only movie, aside from the sequel by technicality, from the studio to include the mouse himself. I'm not including Fun and Fancy Free, you can't make me include that shit. And I think that's the only reason they started with this movie when they decided to make video games, since the movie was never a huge hit in the first place. Mostly thanks to one particular part in history everyone kind of forgot at this point. It's funny I said that actually. Looking into it, it actually made its money back when it reran in theaters after World War II. And the movie became a huge hit in the 60s and 70s thanks to that generation being into psychedelia. I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. But even still, The Sorcerer's Apprentice is all that's represented. No dinosaur killing, no hippo skating, not even Satan making an appearance. No wait, never mind. It's just Mickey stopping brooms and, well, not much else. No kidding, you just shoot down falling stars and stop the brooms from flooding the basement. I'm not even 100% sure, but I think collecting stars causes the buckets to appear. I don't remember that part in the short whatsoever, but yeah, this is just a score attack game on the Atari 2600. Nothing more, nothing less. And it does get a bit intense if you want to go to the surface and hunt for stars, but there's no point. It doesn't change the fact that the game is repetitive and rather bland. Now, the next collection of games are an interesting case. I could only emulate these games simply for not being able to find an Amiga, Commodore, ZX Spectrum, whatever. And I don't have the room for any extra PCs that may or may not work anymore. And the EmuDeck couldn't read any of the ROMs. Thankfully, the Internet Archive has a wide selection of Amiga and Commodore games, but it was a challenge. Now, Winnie the Pooh and the 100-Acre Woods worked no problem, though it did crash a few times, which may or may not be the emulator's fault. Though one of those crashes happened after the game called Rabbit a Ho, so that was a highlight. As someone who loved the movie to death, it was cute to experience the 100-Acre Woods at your leisure, though thanks to it being on old computers, it was slow as dirt. You are better off watching the movie, and honestly, it's the best option by far. Certainly better than The Black Cauldron. This was a movie I never watched growing up, and when I did, I was freaking glad. It is a dark movie just for the sake of being dark, with shitty characters, and even shittier story about a pig that tells the future, and it just sucks. So when I played the game based on the movie, I was very surprised that it was a faithful adaptation. It's also irritatingly boring to experience. Just look at this. This is your walking speed, with collision that confounds my simple senses. And it's also confusing to navigate. I go south a few times and I come back to the farm, where I can't see the pig and I get bashed by a goat. Oh god, what is that sound? This sucks. Nothing more to add. Let me talk about the game based on a movie that's actually good, thank you. The Great Mouse Detective was another one I didn't really grow up with, but unlike The Black Cauldron, where experiencing that movie is like experiencing influenza, this movie is an absolute delight. One of my favorites, actually. With characters worth a damn, a creative story involving a battle of wits between the hero and villain, all brought to life by Ron Clements and John Musker, Disney's best writers and directors by a fair margin. I know The Little Mermaid was the start of the Disney Renaissance, but I'd argue this was the spark for it, if not the true start. Now, as much as I love the movie, the game based on it was weird. First off, the emulator got pretty wonky and all I could do was make Bowser crouch, while this guy was killing him with what I can assume is some potent-ass musk. After a lot of fiddling, I got things working, with a lot of cramping. You move Bowser with the number pad, you can't attack, which is annoying since every enemy will hurt you just by a simple touch, no matter how and where they touch you. But the most annoying part is that you have to jump with the 0 key on the number pad. I repeat, you move with the number pad, and you jump with the key under said number pad. This makes control rather cumbersome, and I just couldn't play much more because of it, aside from the fact that the game is slow, aimless, and claustrophobic. And lastly, for the Amiga games, we have probably the most forgettable Disney movie. Don't lie, the only thing you remember from this movie is Billy Joel and literally nothing else. It's a nothing movie with a nothing story and nothing characters. Now, how do you translate that to a video game? Well, you make a Final Fight clone, only without the fight. I can't say anything else. All you do is collect sausages and try to avoid getting kicked by New Yorkers. Okay, I know New York is pretty brutal, but I don't think New Yorkers would be that cruel to a... who cares? It's Oliver, no one is gonna give a shit. But enough of that, we're starting off the Renaissance era, the movies that a lot of Disney fans are a lot more familiar with, myself included. Some of these are just absolute favorites of mine. However, we are starting off with one that I'm not really in love with. I know there are a lot of people who love this movie, and I like the movie fine. The animation is gorgeous, the music is bopping, and obviously Ursula and Sebastian are the best parts of the movie. But once Ariel leaves the sea, it's kind of a slog. The idea that Ariel can't speak makes the pace feel slower than it is. And Eric is also a little boring for a chunk of the second act too. Aside from the dinner scene, the best part of the second act, obviously. It does get good at the third act, though it does feel a little fast. I don't know. It's not one of my personal favorites from the Renaissance. Hell, I'd probably put it in the bottom 5 personally. But that means nothing when we're talking about video games, and we got a small handful to talk about, starting with the only NES game on the Disney list. We're starting with the second act of the movie, okay? That means... Actually, fuck what that means. They skipped the whole Ursula hypnotizing Eric and said she's just mind-controlling the fish. What? Wait, Ariel just turns back into a mermaid? What the point was Ursula at all? Oh god, this is a sequel. Wait, no, if this was a sequel, then Eric would already know that Ariel was a mermaid, but... What the fuck is this plot? Okay, so we're in the water after all. Why is TMNT on the mind? Jesus, let's hope there isn't any seaweed involved. And something else that elevated the TMNT vibes, power and range. What's the point of the square? Wait, is there an air meter? No, there isn't one in any way, and since you're in the water 98% of the time, that be some kind of bullshit. Though you can go out of the water once in a while. Flippy floppy. Now, the power and range, I couldn't exactly figure out how any of that worked. I mean, these conches were enough to bash enemies' heads in, but you could also use them to open chests that have power-ups, which makes you turn enemies into bubbles faster? Okay. And actually move away these barrels, which I knew you could do something about, thanks to the color, but I was confused as to why I couldn't earlier. Didn't even know you could break the chests either. Never thought to use the conches, using them as a power shield was enough. But they blended in enough to where I thought they were just part of the scenery. It wasn't until I played the Game Boy version where they popped out a lot more. NES or Game Boy though, the game is pretty punishing. When you lose a life, you lose the power-ups, and it makes getting more powerful practically impossible. And getting hit is pretty much inevitable, especially with the run button pushed down? Or would you call it a fast swim button? I don't know. Also don't like how everything resets if you off-screen them by 1 pixel. That gets annoying, especially for certain puzzles. I know it's an NES game, I should cut it some slack, but that's still kind of annoying, you know? Even the music wasn't helping either. It's kinda chipper, but it's generic beach music that repeats rather fast, and the loop is pretty bad too. It's fine, but I kinda stopped that flotsam and jetsam. It's cramped, the crabs are annoying to bubble, I got a game over, and I lost my patience. Now there is another Little Mermaid game to play, but there is another game that was released beforehand, that being... oh shit, Fantasia again. Made by Infogrames, that's not reassuring. At least the Genesis is more impressive than the NES, so let's see if we can get anything out of this over Little Mermaid. Though I highly doubt it. I heard horror stories about this thing, and considering it starts with the sound that reminds me of Haunted Castle, it doesn't give me much peace of mind. Okay, that's pretty nice. You can choose the amount of lives and continues. Oh, no wait, it peaks at 3 each. Kinda lame. Sound test is a nice addition, right off the gate. I wonder if there are any codes in this. And finally, there's a control layout on the bottom. That, well appreciated. Uh-oh. Yeah, I learned about 5 minutes in you have limited magic spells, and you have to collect these books to refill it. Though that's kind of an issue when there are so many enemies flooding the area, so many broomsticks, toads, pelicans, mushrooms? I think they're mushrooms. And none of these go down with 1 weak attack, and you'd think that you could use a strong attack, but I would not recommend that. Each costs 3 units of magic, and because of that, I just choose to either jump over everything or just take the pot shots. Hell, sometimes you don't have a choice in that last option. Look at this. Tell me right to my face that this is thoughtful level design. But even avoidance can be a pain, since Mickey's jump has a slight delay at the start, and it makes evading enemies practically impossible. Platforming was a pain at first, but I figured out the timing of these sporadic platforms and lily pads fairly quickly. And hey, certain spots actually have invisible hit points to collect, so at least the torture is worth it. But then there's this underwater bit. I have no idea if they wanted you to hold or pump the button to rise up, and there's a dead end with no noticeable exit. Nope, I died. That's all my continues, and I'm with Mickey here. I want to get out of this mess. I could see something cool here, but if you want to play anything from Mickey, I'd recommend Castle of Illusion. That's a Genesis game I can get down with. Alright, so we got another... oh, god damn it. Why do people write on the label? People stop doing that. Wait, what does 88B mean? The Little Mermaid for Genesis. So wait, Ariel, the Little Mermaid. Gotta slide that little bit in. Well, the title may not be confusing, but this game sure feels like it's confused. I was expecting kind of an Echo the Dolphin clone here, and I got it half right? You're saving the mer people that got turned into those weed things from the movie, and you shoo enemies away from your singing. Evil sure has no tolerance for the siren song, I suppose. You can get help from your animal friends to push blocks in the way. You can grab some treasures so you can trade with the seagull. Is he actually in the water selling these? And you can buy things ranging from special attacks and flounders and Sebastians? Is fish trafficking a thing? You can get some extra lives if you so desire. Actually, no, those are not actually lives. They act more so as recovery potions, so you don't have to restart from scratch, so okay, that's kinda neat. But that kinda means you can just tank the hits and get it over with, and I certainly recommend doing that. You get bombarded with enemies so quickly, and your dinky song attack can only do so much on the bigger goons. Like these skeletons that I'm pretty sure were not in the movie, they were so resilient, and their scattering body parts will still hurt you, so really, just take the damage and get out ASAP. Also makes the bosses kind of a joke too, even though you can't really tell if you're even damaging them in the first place. Oh, trust me, you're hitting them, you just gotta spam your way to them. Ursula was the worst of it. Like, are you supposed to hit the face? The tentacles? She's just smirking away, and that's all you're getting until she inks all over the place. Yeah, I actually beat this game despite not really knowing what the hell I was even doing. And you know what? Let's take a look at Mr. Grump to see if it gets any harder. Well, I guess I was half right there as well. Once you collect the merfolk, you're just in a dead game. I restarted the console, the game, even ejected and put the cartridge back in, and nothing. As far as I know, Triton just stays to protect the one area, and that's where he demands to stay, I guess. Some king you are. I'll commend it for being both too hard and too easy. That's not a small feat to attempt, but damn, this has nothing to offer. And I'm ashamed I wasted my time. At least the music was nice for Genesis, I'll give it that. And hell, I'll even say the same for the next set of games, based on what I consider the best movie in the Renaissance era. I just adore Beauty and the Beast. Just about everything works about this movie, from the excellent score to the memorable characters, and the excellent story of a monster that grows into a gentle and empathetic being. Anyway, I love this movie to death, so honestly, I'm glad to tarnish all of that with some Sunsoft games. Okay, I'll take Sunsoft over Infogrames, but my expectations are still lower than the State of the Rose. And would you believe me if I said we got 2 games in the same time span? Disney taking the Pokemon route years before Pokemon ever existed. Let's start with Belle's Quest first. Immediately, the music is perfectly translated to the Genesis sound font, starting with the titular song of this title screen. And the town has a version of Belle playing through the stroll, even if it begins as if the game started to crash. But I can't say that praise lasted, as I had no idea where I was supposed to go. Going to the bookstore does nothing but boost your score, which I'm pretty sure does nothing itself. And you can't go any farther right because of this boulder. I had to look up that you have to get the help from Gaston of all people, despite the fact that you had to hide from LeFou in order to avoid the hulking mass. Are they okay? But once he moves the boulder, whoops. Oh, thanks, I'll take the loss, I suppose. But you get a book that restores your health in case the dread birds peck you to death, and then the Lost Woods. I hate this with a burning passion. Even the help from the random pumpkin man doesn't help. There are no hints, no true way to tell the right way. All there exists are bear traps, wicked briar bushes, and wild bats and boars. Anyway, you got the castle where you have a lovely little party where the silverware try to tear you to pieces. Jesus Christ, Lumiere. And we get another maze-like puzzle in the castle, and the true test of your platforming skills in a game where platforming is non-existent. Yeah, okay, this is all I can take. The sudden rat attacks are one thing, but a pixel-perfect jump is the last straw. The beast can stay hideous for all I care. He looks better than his human form anyway. Yeah, speaking of which, maybe War of the Beast will be better. Oh god, no, it is not. This is pretty much Altered Beast, funnily enough. And just like that game, this is also a piece of shit. Just about everything is coming after you, and you can deal with most of it, but the bats? No. The vaguely racially questionable bears? You're getting your ass kicked. The cobras? How the hell are there cobras in France? I couldn't even beat the first level, even with the time-stopping roar. Just a miserable time all around. Yeah, both of these games were actually pretty miserable, now that I think about it. Ugh, thanks, Sunsoft. But forget them, because thanks to Capcom and Virgin, we got what many consider the best of the Disney adaptations, based on my favorite Disney movie as a kid. The movie itself was just an energetic ride, really funny, really imaginative, and damn, that score is fire! My only complaint, even as a kid, was Jasmine's outfit. Why the hell is she in a belly dancer outfit? I'm sure the animators had a good time animating her. Ugh. If only she had a black vest, maybe I'd be softer on the idea. It's a shame I never got a chance to play the game that was based on one of my favorite movies, especially for the Super Nintendo. But considering people usually talk about the Genesis version, let's get that one out of the way. Now, if I can say anything about the game, it is wonderfully animated. They drew every single sprite by hand and digitally compressed them for the Genesis. And the fact that it all looks fluid without dropping a single frame is impressive in and of itself. And it's not just the sprites themselves, the amount of detail spread around is amazing. From the guard at the beginning hopping on his feet from the hot cold, to the sword tosser slicing your apples in half. That is such an amazing touch, but god is it so annoying I only get so many of these things! The game does take a lot of liberties though. Like, first off, the robber from the beginning of the movie, he's alive as the first boss for some reason. Yeah, he's pathetically easy, but he's here. There's this Dong Bluth looking guy for the Cave of Wonders boss, and he's also painfully easy. Iago is a recurring enemy for some reason, though it is fun to throw some apples at his itty-bitty clones. And bashing him in his little contraption was as funny as it is pathetically easy. Hey, if you don't stop throwing those apples, I'll toss you into the crocodiles! Unfortunately though, the bosses are the only easy parts. This game is brutal. Like, the amount of times I got sniped by bats off screen is more than it should be tolerated. And the bones from these exploding skeletons still hurt you on contact, and yes, there are skeletons with cherry bombs in this game, and no, I don't know why either. The prison. Talk about a gut punch after another. The spikes on the walls blend in so well that it makes avoiding them the first time nearly impossible. And these bricks that act like the Mega Man blocks is some annoying shit too. The second part of the Cave of Wonders isn't that fun either. Insta-kill boulders, plus the lava spouts nerfing your jumps. Not ashamed to say I used the rewind feature on the collection. Oh, I should have mentioned, I'm playing the Aladdin games on the Disney collection, and by extension, I'm playing the other games on it as well. And to jump the gun, all of these games are pretty much enhanced with the rewind, because again, these games are beyond difficult. Almost demoralizing at points. I'm also not ashamed that I used it on the Genie games too. Gets me apples faster, that's for sure. Not too crazy for the lives, especially when I learned it caps, so that's fun. Shame the rewind doesn't make the ending better. This fight is straight up painful. Only apples can hit Jafar, and once he transforms into the snake, you're practically hitting him blind. Since you can't stand on the tables without getting burned, and the constant shots of fire on the ground is so tight. Not a fun fight, no matter what you do. And it's a shame. This game was actually a lot of fun, even with the constant use of rewind. I can say the collection is worth it for this alone. Just don't feel pressured to play it to the end. Again, this is some Snake Eyes right here. Oh, what do you have for me, Mr. Merchant? You had the final cut for the game? Well, I guess we can check it out. So this is pretty much what the game would have been if the dev team had more time to polish the game, with a few of the original developers supervising. This is such a better version. I feel either the health bar is longer or the damage isn't as brutal. Or maybe that's my mind playing tricks, but I've had less low blows. Aside from these damn bats, they still suck dick. I also feel the Genie minigame is a lot more forgiving, like I didn't use the rewind once for the first 2 tries. Got enough apples and lives to keep me going. The Cave of Wonders is still a little rough, and the Jafar fight still relies on blind faith, but I was still able to beat the fight, albeit with a lot of rewind, and, well, that's not much of a reward, but at least I knew the game was analyzed by a cat. That's cute. Now, with that said, off to the Super Nintendo, which was actually added later on as DLC along with the Game Boy version. The Super Nintendo version is made by Capcom, and they made some great licensed games beforehand. Hell, the Little Mermaid game that was made on NES wasn't terrible, so I'm expecting nothing less than decent. Okay, that's not as pretty as Virgin's game, and the music is fine, though I prefer the alternative. Oh god, this feels slower too. Aladdin just feels like he's jogging than actually running from the guards. One difference compared to Virgin's game involves you getting apples and health from these vases, and instead of hitting them, Aladdin just likes to show off by using flips on them. Oh. Honestly, I'm not a fan of doing flips in this game. It makes the platforming and overall movement a little too anxiety-inducing for my taste. Did I just jump on that boulder? You know what, the Cave of Wonders is still a pain just like the Genesis game, though I think it has the worst carpet chase. Everything is instant death. What a fun time. The game is fine, but it's clear to see why they didn't include this one originally. It's not as flashy, not as quick, and the apples are less potent here, just used for stunning, which I guess makes sense, but kinda makes long range an issue. Since it's part of the collection, it's virtually harmless. And you know what? I can say the same with the Game Boy version, but oh god, this is bad. This is so bad. The fact that this is based on the Genesis version just makes it all the more sluggish. Nothing feels fluid at all. I'm starting to question the importance of game preservation now. I can't go farther from this is just too painful. Now there is a version on the Game Gear, and it has nothing to do with any of the two home versions, which surprised me. You'd think Virgin would have ported their game to the Game Gear instead of the Game Boy, but that's neither here nor there. Since it's not in the collection, I decided to buy it, and since my analog came in, it'll help recording this a lot easier. Wow, this is becoming promising. And the music is really close to film perfect, albeit it is a bit crunched. The sprite work is great for the system, and it's an auto runner? I guess it makes sense for the movie, but you know what? It kind of leaves you with a false expectation. But once you get to the Cave of Wonders, you get the traditional levels. They're more puzzle-focused than they are combat-focused. You actually don't have access to any form of attacking aside from fighting and throwing stones, even though they only stun guards in the palace. Hey, I am your superior. I should have you beheaded for this insolence. I will give the Cave of Wonders level this. I like that if you touch treasure, it is an instant death. That's kind of a cute touch, though trying to jump over them is a pain since running is really annoying. Also makes sliding a pain because of that, too. I didn't even know there was a slide, or a run for that matter. The B button didn't do much, and double tapping didn't seem to do anything either. Apparently I had to hit right downwards a bit to make sure it registered. Yeah, that's not clunky at all. Is this version worth playing? Kinda not really. Half of this game is just watching the story unfold almost verbatim, with some changes. The cane is a lot less terrifying than the dagger, guys. Why the hell did you change this? And completely skipping the snow scene was complete whiplash. Though really thinking about it, all the versions kinda missed that. And the game is, for all intents and purposes, brain dead. It doesn't help that it doesn't have a life count, which is very welcome, but it makes little difference aside from, don't be shocked, the carpet chase. But that's the outlier. The spikes in the Cave of Wonders suck too, but there's checkpoints that alleviate that bullshit a bit. I don't see much of a reason not to have this in the collection. I'd play it over the Game Boy game, but just like that version, I don't think it's really anything special. Next on the docket, we have a pretty strong part of my childhood, based on one of my favorites. Oh, wait, we got a couple more Beauty and the Beast games to talk about. Never mind, let's get those out of the way. Well, technically, after playing both of them, they're essentially the same game. You play as the Beast to try and stop Belle from going into the West Wing, while the rose is weathering a lot faster than it does in the movie. Jesus Christ, I mean, it's a clever way of having a time limit, but why have the damn time limit? You're going through a maze with a lot of hazards, and you're playing as a giant lug, and sometimes you gotta wait painfully for Lumiere to light the way. God, I hate this. It's even worse in the NES version, where the range is shorter and it goes completely black. Maybe there's a reason the NES game is Europe only. I could say both of the versions look great in their own way. I kinda like the color and high detail Hudson Soft did for the NES version, but I heavily prefer the atmosphere on the SNES. It's a lot closer to the movie, and the music is haunting, but also catchy in its own way. The NES game's music is far more upbeat than it should be, but at least it's a bop, so I can't really complain. Well, I say that, but that's all the praise I got for these. Everything else about the game sucks dick. These spiders and bats are in the most obnoxious places. Better than NES, but that's not saying anything. Only certain walls can be climbed, which I know there is a difference in what wall you can climb, but it's kind of annoying when you think you need to climb, but you need to go back and use a block. There's a roar button, just like Roar of the Beast, but not only does it stop time, it affects how certain platforms move? I'm sorry, that's just straight up stupid. Same with the dumbass freezing floor that kills you on contact. Same with the fire that hurts you, even if it's just the smoke hitting the platform. Same with the rogue candlesticks. Same with the bats that you need to stun in order to use them as platforms. Same with the damn mirror that tells you the level design, only for a bat hiding in pitch darkness sniping at you once you have control. God, I do not like this. Sure, there are some checkpoints, and the time limit isn't as strict as the NES version, but this is a test of pure frustration. 0 for 3 on the Beauty and the Beast games. Hope they never see the light of day again. Okay, now let's get to it. Let's talk about the Jungle Book. So there seems to be a few games based on the Jungle Book in this generation, and I was kinda confused when I learned about that. Like, the movie is fine, I liked it okay as a kid, the characters are fun, I liked a couple of the musical numbers, Cobb makes me very uncomfortable thanks to the internet, but I digress. It's a good vibe movie, but like, did people really like it that much for Disney to mass merchandise it? It turns out, yeah. Doing the research, as well as some tedious math, The Jungle Book was actually Disney's 4th highest grossing film when adjusting for inflation. Actually, I guess that explains why Tailspin exists, I guess. That was certainly a thing. This is also why Pinocchio got a video game a couple of years later, more on that momentarily, and I guess that's why 101 Dalmatians and the Disney Princess line became franchises. Why Bambi got snubbed is beyond me, but at least that got a mediocre sequel. So I guess we got a few games out of this as well, and they were added to the Disney Classic Collection with Aladdin as an update. So, let's talk about the Genesis version, I guess. So how do you make a video game about a movie that is not very story-driven, or action-driven, or driven? Well, as far as I'm concerned, just make it a collect-a-thon with gemstones and shaman masks. Not touching that with a 10-foot snake. Like, what does any of this have to do with the damn movie? There's the elephants, there's the monkeys trying to take Mowgli out, there's the snake. What the hell kind of wizardry is this? And there's Baloo that throws fruit towards you, all while you're trying to not drown. You know, the game tells you that the water is hazardous, but to end the level, you actually have to fall in. Consistency be damned. I'm not sure why Mowgli would have any interest in these gemstones, or if Bagheera needs them, or whatever the hell is going on. What I do know is that this is kinda boring. I wasn't really frustrated, aside from the aforementioned Ka fight, and nothing is really entertaining aside from the fact that the Elephant Kid looks like he was ripped straight from an Amiga game. And whatever the hell this dance is. It looks like Mowgli is made of rubber. Like, what is this dance, seriously? Also, this has to take the record for fastest idle animations in any video game I've ever played. This game, just like Aladdin, is pretty ambitious for the animation, even though it's not as accurate to the source material. Like, why are Mowgli's eyes the size of personal pan pizzas? Jesus Christ. Despite some fun visual stuff, I couldn't care to finish this. It's just a boring scavenger hunt, and it's not like the Super Nintendo version is any better. There's a dragonfly that looks like Pooh sometimes, and you can climb on a dragonfly to get high. The prehistoric era never left. And despite the game using similar sprites, everything looks bigger and therefore cheap shots are much more common. And for some reason, collision detection is kind of a pain in this game, and how the hell did that hit me? Screw you, monkey man. This snake is just rapidly spitting and you have no window of opportunity to take him out. Who approved of this dick-headed decision? None of this is helped by the fact that you have so little health and next to no invincibility frames. So get used to the creepy monkey nurses. There is this one owl ripped from Bambi that'll throw you hearts if you throw bananas at it. That's a thing, I guess, but at least it's better than the rest of the birds on this godforsaken tree. That guy just... I'm sorry? None of the collectibles mean anything in this one, as far as I know. I guess these nuts can be used for weapons, but it's not like I needed them. But yeah, it still did the trick if the toucans were any indication. Gee, seriously, what the hell happened there? But the gems are just an afterthought this time, which is weird, because they now have green gems that do nothing, I'm pretty sure. Yep, that sure was Baloo the Bear. Are any of these versions really worth playing? No. Not like I can stop you, they're in the collection, so it's harmless to try them. But you're best trying something else, honestly. Oh, and don't worry about the Game Boy version. I got to the end and literally nothing happened. There's an extra light below if you have the sixth sense to figure it out. That's all I got from it. I mean, I guess there's fruit that heal you and... there are clocks in the jungle in a time period that doesn't have clocks. Before I move on, I actually forgot about this one Jungle Book game for the old computers like the Amiga 500. Just kind of slipped through the research, though I couldn't find a way to play it for some reason. Even looking at World of Long Plays, this is kinda surreal. You can hurt your friends in this game. Like, why the hell would you ever want to do this? And what are these noises Mowgli is making? It's so goddamn goofy. I also can't forget these random-ass people in a theater. This is kind of clashing with the aesthetic a bit, don't you think? Like, look at the variety here. It was like they were trying to make as many 80s stereotypes as they could here. Anyway, now we can move on. You okay, Blue? And moving on, we shall to a childhood memory that still haunts me 20 years later. Oh boy. I loved The Lion King as a kid. The scope of the savannah was nothing I've ever seen in a movie. There is no musical moment that takes away from the world building or the overall message of grief and learning from the past. Even today, it is a movie I can go back to and be reminded that no matter what happens, I can overcome any challenge. Whether it be an episode of depression, ending a relationship that couldn't work out, dealing with the death of a loved one, or even something as small as writer's and artist block. It's a film that will never grow stale for me. And because I love this movie, I was super hyped to learn that there was a game on the Super Nintendo about it. My aunt had a copy in her collection, and I tried to play it to the best of my ability. Yeah, to the surprise of nobody that's played this game, the second level was a straight up hurdle for me, and I remember that being where I stayed. To my utter shock, when I went back to it, I actually remembered the stage afterwards, so I did get past it as a kid, somehow. But those ostrich chases were the bane of my existence, plus the godforsaken monkeys being a puzzle I couldn't wrap my head around. Plus those rhino tails just having the strictest collision detection, I swear to God. Plus Simba's movement caused me to struggle going around those damned logs in the river, as if only I had access to rewind back in the day. And it's more evident in the later stages as young Simba. Fuck the hyenas, like I get it, they're stronger, but goddamn, it was a pain in the neck trying to predict their landing positions and waiting for them to tire out. And the moment you hurt them, their hitbox immediately activates. Cheap shot, game. These vultures are also a pain, but it is super satisfying to pin them down, especially when you double tap them. Speaking of cheap shots, the falling rocks and the insta-kill boulders in the stage after the wildebeest chase is rather much. Also, that chase is great, but what the hell is this bullshit here? I was at the side of that thing. Even though the game is harder than surviving the American healthcare system, it is rather generous with health pickups, and you can get lives and continues rather easily if you can find the right areas. Make sure Timon and Pumbaa grab enough bugs, aside from the obvious avoid me spiders. Are black widows even found in Africa? Oh, I guess so. I also have to ask what these bugs are. The fact that they're harmful means they're something dangerous, but my research came short. Funnily enough, once Simba becomes an adult, the game starts to get easier, albeit a little cryptic. The volcano level had two weird design choices, especially the minute-long wait at the very end, which was absolutely ridiculous. Sure, there's plenty of enemy groups that will beat you to a pulp, though this little slap makes short work of all of them, except bats. Fuck those things. And climbing is still as annoying as it is as a club, but ultimately, I still had fun with the second half of the game. Otherwise, I'd say it's more fun than I remembered. I'd say it's worth a playthrough, and if you need to use that rewind, it's there, so nobody should ever blame you for using it. I used it liberally, and I have no shame from that. Now, I would talk about the Genesis version, but surprisingly, it's just about the same game. Just looks and controls slightly different. And the Game Boy version... ugh. Gotta say, this collection is amazing. Not all of it is good, and I think it wouldn't have hurt to have the Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast games included, but it's worth owning for the Lion King and Genesis version of Aladdin alone. And the fact they bothered to make a better version of Aladdin, plus including the soundtracks and shitty Game Boy games, makes it a weirdly excellent deal for folks interested in preserving classic games. But honestly, they're forgetting a crucial Lion King game that was also released on the Super Nintendo. That's right, this collection does not have Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games. Okay, full transparency, I was going to play the PC version for this video, but that was not going to happen. Apparently Windows 10 hates playing 16-bit PC games, meaning I couldn't play 4 of the games I had on this 100-game long list. Thankfully, I had console versions of 2 of them, albeit one of them is a Game Boy port. And both of them are just minigame collections. But this game, based on the live-action 101 Dalmatians movie, couldn't be played. which is kind of a shame. I would have loved to see the Bit Crunch Glenn Close personally. And I didn't bother with this Tarzan game, mostly because I couldn't find a copy, and considering all 3 of these refused to play, I'm so glad I didn't spend the cash on a 4th drink coaster. Seeing the footage also doesn't leave much to the imagination. This would have been awful to experience. Not like any of these would have been fun to begin with, but hey, Timon and Pumbaa is still playable for the Super Nintendo, so maybe it's not as bad as I imagine. Why must I raise my own expectations? There is nothing impressive here for anyone over the age of 5. I don't care for the shitty pinball, or the shitty Frogger, or the shitty murder, and I certainly don't care for the shitty Galaga that has ammo for some godforsaken reason. I think there are more games on the PC version, but I don't really care. I'd rather just move on to the next. Oh, are you serious? Okay. Cards on the table, I really hate Disney's Pocahontas. First time I watched it as a kid, I thought it was boring as sin, with really unappealing character designs, bland story, and music that was not as catchy as the other Renaissance era films. And that's including Colors of the Wind. Like, melodically it's fine and all, but listening to the lyrics just makes it feel awkward and on the nose. But after learning about the true story of Pocahontas in 5th grade, I kinda hated it a lot more. The original story is such an interesting, more nuanced part of American history, and the fact that they made Pocahontas older, gave her a romance with John Smith, and gave us a shitty-ass villain with a motivation so unoriginal and vague, it makes the story more childish than Jeffrey Katzenberg would have hoped for. And the fact all of this was done solely because Beauty and the Beast got nominated for Best Feature at the Oscars. You know, if you actually followed the story, Jeff, maybe your chances would have been solid. But you decided to make this as marketable as possible, and it blew up in your face, so get what you deserve, old man. I seriously can't understand how anyone would ever like this movie, even if you take away the historical accuracies. It's just an offensively deplorable movie, but the most deplorable thing about this is that they actually had the nerves, the gall, to make a video game based on this godforsaken movie. That's like taking the Prince of Egypt and going, now let's make a 3D platformer for this. This just feels incredibly scummy, and that's the reason why this is the only game I chose to emulate instead of buying it. But you know what? I'll give the game this. It's a great representation of the movie, because this game is also slow, clunky, and boring. Jumping feels stone-like, Miko is practically worthless, you need power-ups to run and swim. Sure, the animations are stellar, but great animation does not a great game make. I'm not even going to bother with the Game Boy version, mostly because the music nearly slashed my eardrums in half. And Pocahontas looks like a Picasso piece. I don't think there's anything I can imagine being worse than this. At least the next game is based on a film that I actually like. It's night and day in comparison. It's funny, I think this was the Disney movie I watched the most back then, alongside Lion King and Aladdin. It's a very dark and mature movie compared to its contemporaries, with sexual undertones and dark themes centered around 2 of the main characters. Quasimodo is such a sympathetic dreamer that wants to live in the land below, and survives the abuse of one of the most disturbing villains in any animated movie. And while I didn't understand any of this as a child, I was still engaged with the turmoil of just about every character dealing with the tragedies caused by Frollo. Sure, the gargoyles are hit and miss, and the tone can be a little wacky, but honestly, those are just small, minor nitpicks in my opinion. I could say more about this movie. It's still one of the best movies from Disney, and I'm actually wondering how they can make a video game based on the movie without dumbing it down to an audience. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. Yeah, this is just a minigame collection based on the Festival of Fools, where you can play medieval breakout, goat bowling, balloon fights, and one of those stupid sliding puzzles. I wish I had more to say about it, but really? What you see is what you get. It's pretty well animated for the Game Boy, I'll give it that, and I'm sure there's more to it if you play the PC game, but like I said before, that's basically unplayable nowadays. Now, I did say Toy Story was my first overall Disney movie, but if I remember correctly, I think Pinocchio was actually the first Disney animated movie I've watched. Well, Toy Story is also animated, but you get my point. My family had this on VHS, so I just watched it one day and... the start of my fascination for horror right here, ladies and gentlemen. Sadly, that's kind of all I remember about the movie. It has an imaginative start with Geppetto, Figaro, and Fish Lips. It's got some catchy music about gay actors, and when the movie gets dark, it catches my attention, but the rest of the movie is just dull. And that's kind of including Jiminy Cricket, one of my least favorite Disney characters of all time. He's just bland and boring. Even when he gets angry, I find him just vanilla. If this were my conscience, I'd probably be dead at the age of 6. Like seriously, why is he one of the company's most frequently used characters? I want someone to squish him. Badly. Also, this movie is completely bonkers and incoherent. Like, nothing connects to each other aside from the fox and cat. Maybe. And with that said, the game is just about as incoherent. Like, no shit, barely anything in this game is taught well. Took me 2 whole minutes to figure out you could actually walk in the background. And the end of this rhythm game where they tell you to make a move they never tell you about. Or the fact that you have to float on these balloons to the top where you have to ride a roller coaster that bonks you off 10 seconds in. Couldn't move a duck sign a little earlier, guys. Speaking of ducks, 5 minutes in, I'm starting to wonder if the people at Disney Interactive has a thing against birds. Like, damn.
Affleck, you little bitch!
Yeah, this game just jumps you in, and you have to basically read its mind. I had to use a guide a couple of times with the past few games, but this was the first time where I had to check a guide for just about every level. Once I explored the whale for 15 minutes, I just got bored and drowned myself. At least the music from the movie was transferred flawlessly here. And the animation is top-notch. No surprise there. They went hard on the animations for these games, like, Jesus Christ. If those weren't up to snuff, I would have put this alongside Fantasia in the bottom tier. Because honestly, I'm pretty sure this game does not want you to have fun. Terrifies me to wonder how the Game Boy version holds. Okay, I am convinced that this was all made by an evil cult. Let us never speak of it again. And that's it for the 16-bit era. No more Genesis, no more Super Nintendo. I'm absolutely surprised that I said that with any form of enthusiasm, but that just goes to show how mixed I have been with this entire collection. Like, the only games that I can really recommend are Aladdin on Genesis, either of the console versions of The Lion King, and if you catch me on a good day, maybe The Little Mermaid on NES, but that's kind of it. The rest are just there. Unfortunately, we're not out of the hellhole yet, because the next game we're talking about is based on the Renaissance movie I like the least. Aside from the animated hate crime, anyway. Even as a kid, Hercules is a movie that left no impact on me. The main character himself is just a typical empty-headed strong guy with a heart of gold. Meg is the snarky and pessimistic damsel in distress, but not really much else. Bill and Hades are kind of funny, definitely the best parts of the movie, but nowadays James Woods' voice just makes me cringe a bit, even removing his personal views and all that. I do like the art style and musical numbers enough for me to say that it's a fun watch regardless, aside from the CGI. That shit is just gross. However, even with my lukewarm reception, once I got into high school and my art teacher put this movie on at least twice a year, I began to like this movie less and less. Seriously, you couldn't have any other movie aside from this, and okay, to be perfectly fair, it's at least better than the Da Vinci Code. This is such an awful mystery movie. Like, who really gives a fuck about Jesus Christ marrying some random bimbo from the Middle East? The whole marriage happened 2 millennia ago, Tom. How does this affect our current day society? Also, why is it so crazy that your partner is his descendant? Again, 2 millennia. She cannot be the only bitch with New Testament blood in them. Also, what the hell does Isaac Newton have anything to do with Jesus Christ? And why is the answer to one of the riddles just straight up Apple? What brain-dead cocksucker wrote this piece of... Never mind. I digress. We can just move on. Okay, so yeah, Hercules. Yeah, well, it's not one of my personal favorites. That doesn't mean the game based on it can't be good. Hell, Fantasia is a stone cold classic, and both of its adaptations were poo. So let's hope that this has the opposite effects. I was actually surprised that this game was ported to Steam. That I was gonna have to hunt for a PS1 copy for a moment there. Kinda had to fumble with the controls, and that was a pain in the neck, but with all that done, well, the pain didn't stop. The game's graphics are beyond impressive, similar to Genesis Aladdin, but like Aladdin, this game is brutal, and sadly, I don't have a rewind feature to help me. There are passwords, but it takes an eternity to put in anything, since you have to watch Meg move over to any of the vases and then wait for her to turn them. this is just a drag. And if you don't have the right password, you get straight up booted. I am so sorry I don't remember who Nessus is, GameFAQs. Assholes.
Right.
I'm sorry? As well animated as this game is, it kinda drags every moment here. Doesn't help that some things just take longer than they should. Fuck these pillars and rocks. Not like I can't move around them, herc. And that's not me going, hooter, 2D platformer don't make any sense. No, there are points where you can move forward and back and even have 3D auto runners that have really bad depth perception, but that's beside the point. So honestly, this is just an ego boost at this point. Just a warning, Herc, you're getting bested by background centaurs and birds. Why the hell do they shatter like glass when you hit them? I would think they're cockatrices, but like, they turn people to stone, right? Not themselves. Oh, I fucking hate this. They're just so weird to hit. Come on, Herc, use your sword! Except the sword can only do so much when you can't see jack shit. Honestly, after getting a game over from an obscured Pegasus, I just gave up. You only get one continue, lives get wasted fast, and not even the little trinkets that increase your health help, since it doesn't give you any of the health you gain. And what's the point of literally any of the collectibles? You can collect all the letters that spell Hercules. What do they do? I don't know. You can find these random vases. What do they do? I don't know. What do all these random coins do that get tallied at the end of the stage? I don't know. This game is painful, confusing, and the music loops make it even more obnoxious. Is this a Steam release thing or something? It's very distracting. Oh, speaking of distracting, let's move on to the Game Boy version, because what the actual hell is this? Right off the gate, 3 thoughts come to mind. 1, who the hell is that? This isn't Hercules, that's fucking Conan. 2, the animation is way too smooth. It's almost like Conan is made of liquid metal. Like, good God. And 3, Jesus Christ. Everything here is fast as hell. Like, what kind of Olympian magic did they conjure up to get everything this smooth on the Game Boy? Shame Hercules Belmont is just as clunky. There is a run button if you hold the attack button, but it makes your jump very delayed, which is funny considering everything else. I have to say, this is very odd. The hazards are far too quick to respond to your clunky control, and the level design is convoluted. Who would predict that this part of the cliff would be the edge? The Game Boy, everybody. So birth versions of action game featuring Hercules are not very good. Kinda disappointing. And the disappointment doesn't stop, because we got Mulan to talk about now. Not saying the movie is bad, not by any means. I absolutely loved this movie when I was younger. It's just got a lot of artistic and natural beauty to it. Top that up with a wonderful protagonist, a clever story based on an otherwise quaint poem, the gorgeous music that complements a tone that's surprisingly more mellow compared to their previous movies, and many fun and quirky side characters, including the bisexual icon himself, Shen. My only issue with the movie is the weak villain, but that's kind of about it. Everything else is just perfect in my eyes. It's a shame this movie spawned an agonizingly pathetic sequel and a depressingly misguided live-action movie I refuse to watch out of principle. Back to the disappointing thing. This game is kinda bad. Mulan feels smooth enough, but it's amazing how strict just about every action is. Makes you wonder why the run button isn't just your standard speed. Climbing up walls and ropes is a pain, especially in the air, and don't get me started on the ponds. A little breathing room would be lovely, guys. Or you could let me get out of the pond, like the second stage that lets you swim, even though that scene in the movie only had Mulan in the water for less than 2 minutes. Also, this time I stopped playing the game because for some reason this game only has 1 life and absolutely no continues, which is very annoying because I have to remember passwords and I don't really care for the game enough to do that. I wish I could say more about this, but it's bad enough for a game to be clunky, but a boring, clunky game is hard to really talk about, let alone make a joke about. The Game Over portrait is kinda ugly though. That's kinda funny. Also, the starting screen Mulan looks like an emoji. Oh, would you look at that? Our last Game Boy game followed by our first Game Boy Color game. Thank God the grayscale was frustrating. Thanks, Analog. Or is this actually what they look like on a Game Boy player? I'm not testing that. And also, this is coming from one of my favorite Disney movies to one I don't really remember much. Not trying to knock down Tarzan or anything, it's a good movie in its own right. It's got good action and one of the most gruesome villain deaths in any movie from memory. But I never cared for the original story, and this movie doesn't really make it any more interesting. The Phil Collins music is fine, but the lack of any character songs makes the world feel smaller. Not saying it had to be a full-blown musical, but if you had to fill the movie with music, have the characters sing it? I don't know. Also, Rosie O'Donnell is annoying as hell, and the fact that most of the memories I have with this movie are about her makes this movie less good. Putting that aside, our first Tarzan game is on the Game Boy Color, and the best way I can explain this game is Donkey Kong Country if it was in a box. Kinda like a Game Boy Color D-Maker returns at points, mostly thanks to the wall and ceiling climbing. Hell, the music sounds like it's about to transition into Jungle Japes at any second. You just collect bananas and swing on vines. That's about it. The concepts are so great that it was done better from earlier and later games from a completely different series. But it's practically unplayable otherwise. At least I'm pretty sure it is. Once I got enough bananas, I was told to go over to Turk, and she is perched on this one platform that no matter what I do, I can't get over to. Whatever the actual solution is, I'm not motivated enough to meet Rosie again, so fuck her. But let's get to the big boy. Tarzan on the PlayStation is a game I've known about, and when I look at it, I just think of Klonoa or Kirby 64. A 2.5D platformer that feels more 3D in its design, and in this case, in a very bad way. There are times where you think you can go down, only to learn it's not even in the right plane, you idiot. I really don't like this level design. Nothing feels thought out in the slightest. Everything comes out of nowhere, jumps are tighter than a last-minute flight change, and enemies that are harder to hit to the point they're practically invincible.
Too slow, dumbass!
Nice try, bitch! Eat my ass!
You gotta be quicker!
You can only attack enemies with what I assume are pairs? You also get a knife, but you have to use the triggers. It's got a short range. Screw that noise. And don't even think about jumping on enemies. That doesn't work in this platformer. It's just unpleasant, and after dealing with the stupid elephant stampede and the cats that blended in with the tree trunk, I just said screw it. And it's weird, since it's pretty generous with health extensions and health pickups, and there are plenty of coins for some extra lives, you'd really think that'd be a safety net, but no, there's just way too much insta-kill stuff to make it even remotely fun. There are also the letters of Tarzan scattered around, how inspired.
I still think Tarzan's a weird name.
Oh, you shut up. And there are those monkey sketches because reference that will take you to a bonus. Frankly, it's the best part of the game. Alright, what? Okay, who at Disney thought it was a neat idea to make a party game on the Game Boy Color based on Beauty and the Beast? Talk about shooting darts at a dartboard. Or a game board, in this case. I'm not sure how anyone would buy this just on the premise alone. Party games are best when you have a group of people to play with, and while multiplayer with a Game Boy isn't impossible, I'm actually not even sure you can play this multiplayer, and even if you can, I don't see anyone subject their friends to this. You got Candyland-style boards with minigames that are either brain-dead or just completely agonizing. Be our guest, this minigame is giving me stress. Also, playing the story mode has you racing against Gaston to save the beast, and he always has 6 spaces, meaning you got to play the minigames to keep up, and I was so unlucky to get the 2 hardest games over and over. Meaning I didn't get those extra moves, meaning the Rose dies, the Beast dies, all to the tone of some very happy music, fitting for a direct-to-DVD sequel. I gotta laugh out of that, but that's all the joy I got from this. Let's continue and forget this going forward. But speaking of direct-to-DVD sequels, we got our first game based on one. Kind of. The Lion King Simba's Mighty Adventure. I hate that name so much. So I did say it was based on the sequel, but it's actually based on both that and the original. Since you start off as young Simba, grow up to fight Scar, and then the events of Simba's Pride start, but it only focuses on the parts Simba is a part of? Yeah, no Kiara, no Kovu, it's just a Simba show for the entire game. It's kind of a shame, since I believe Kovu would have had a nice little side story here, but I guess they didn't care that much. Or the budget wasn't there, either or. Simba controls like a tank, thanks to the fact that you can only use the D-pad. Being able to use the stick to slow down or just turn smoothly would have made the platforming feel much more natural. It is the first truly 3D platformer here, but this is also 2000. Like, come on, the DualShock was a thing for half a decade at this point. They had no excuse. Walking isn't the only issue, unfortunately. Simba's moveset is just... no. Pouncing is a crapshoot, roaring is pathetically short-ranged and requires multiple shots, and rolling is so unruly, I only used it for the 2 bosses in the game, since that's the only thing that hurts them for some reason. Also, anyone getting Tiny Tiger vibes with this phase? Rather ironic. It's not just the controls that are clunky though, the collision is completely whack. Like, you're gonna be clipping and sliding and getting stuck on the invisible walls. On the first level of the sequel half, the fire taunted me over and over, like this moment here.
Save Kiara, Simba!
Yeah, listen to John Oliver, Simba, you fuck. At least you can jump on most of the enemies. That's better than Tarzan for that alone. And it one-shots everything, so everything else is just worthless. And yeah, that's about as much as I can say about this game as well. Just worthless. Okay, so I kind of forgot to talk about the Game Boy Color version, and all I can say is that it looks like the 16-bit Lion King, and Simba sounds like a fucking dying cat. Like, holy shit, shut the everlasting fuck up. Same with this music, like, holy shit, it is the most obnoxious shit I have ever heard in my entire life. Oh, I completely forgot to talk about the music for the console version. It's kind of fine. The music for the boss fights, that is, why is it so upbeat? You guys had one job. Oh, would you look at that? More Pooh! What were they smoking to think making 2 party games on the Game Boy Color on the same damn year was a good idea? And why are they the most basic boards that make Candyland look like an actual board game? Half the time you're just rolling your dice all alone, and it's like, what's the point? Also, why are there character-specific penalties where you eat food? And why is Tigger's food honey? Did nobody actually watch the original movie? Like, if they did, they would actually know that Tiggers don't like honey. Respect the Winnie the Pooh lore, you hacks. Also, Pooh doesn't stretch with Kanga, he stretches alone. Seriously, did nobody watch the original movie? I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm just gonna move on. Never mind, I want to stay with Pooh. God, I really hate this movie. Even as a kid, I thought this movie was freaking boring. And I know everyone thought it looked stunning, but you know, when you're a small child, you kind of don't realize that all of that is created by human hands, so all I had to experience is the story and characters. And they are straight up garbage. From the annoying love monkey to the bland-ass earthworm with arms and legs. And whatever the other fuckwits are. Also, the story is just The Land Before Time, without any of the charm, atmosphere, or nuance. Like, they have a villain in this movie, and he impacts nothing. Actually, this movie in general impacts nothing. I'll take this over Pocahontas, but that's only because it's not offensively bad, it's just bad. And the fact that I had to play games based on this piece of shit makes me itchy. Now, I know the Game Boy Color game came out first, but I kind of forgot about that and played the console game first. By the way, this came out 3 months after the Game Boy game. Like, they wanted to give this game as much polish as possible, and did they succeed? Well, what do you think? They had to translate what was exclusively a visual showcase into a PlayStation 1 game. And when you do that with the story presumably intact, what are you going to expect other than pure boredom? I couldn't finish the first level because the last objective, the one where you have to destroy these meat eaters that look like purple turds, I take them out and nothing really happens. I go back to Pterodactyl Mom and Yeet Monkey and again, nothing. So I assume maybe I have to go on a genocide and fuck these raptors, they have so much health and give out so much health. Ugh, God, I hate these things. That bullshit, coupled with the AI being brain dead on slopes, made me realize that my time would be wasted if I figured out what I was doing wrong. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to hope that the Game Boy Color game is a better choice. Oh look, a stray save. Let's look at that. Oh god, am I in hell right now? This looks like I'm playing a handheld version of Doom, yet instead of playing as a buff dude in green armor, I'm playing as a field mouse and a Queen Metroid. I'm going to assume this is all it has because I can't figure out an exit from this. I'm stranded in this rust pit. Is this a punishment for slandering the movie? Well, too fucking bad I said what I said, but we can move on nonetheless. What's next on the docket? Shit. Yep, we're back to the sequel train. I didn't actually watch Little Mermaid 2, mostly because the trailers made it look like it seemed a little too silly for me. Didn't bother watching the movie for the purpose of knowing what the source material is for this video, since, I mean, look at this. I'm expecting less than average from what seems to be little girl bait. That sounded worse than I wanted it to sound. Anyway, let's see how bland this actually is. Oh, before I start, I know there is a pinball game based on the movie, and it's pinball on the Game Boy Color. There's nothing really much to say. If you don't like that I have very little to say about this, sorry to disappoint you. The best part of the game was one of the splash screens looking like a Jeopardy screen. With that said, oh god, they look like they were smacked with metal pipes. And that voice acting is...
No game would be complete without the pickups.
not stellar. But you know, for a game made for little girls, I didn't hate what I played. It is kind of therapeutic searching for the pearls and doodads in the sea, and while I'm not in love with the source material, it wasn't enough to throw me off. Not until the Ursula fight and things go absolutely downhill. The Little Mermaid 2 segment just seems like it was made for little girls that are dumb enough to not know what a button is. I finished the game in an hour, thanks to it being rather simple and easy, and it lacks lives to make it blaze by, which sounds progressive, but for something that's this brain dead, it almost sounds insulting. I don't see anyone enjoying this to the fullest, aside from very, very young children that'll find it cute at the very least. But that's enough Renaissance for a little bit. Let's talk about another favorite of my childhood. I adore Alice in Wonderland. Everything about it is just so dreamlike. From the animation, to the wacky characters, to the admittedly weird, unfocused story, but honestly that's kind of its charm. The fact that nothing really connects just adds to that dreamlike quality, and yeah, I just absolutely love everything about this movie. Anytime I'm in the mood for anything wacky and fun, I always plop this in. It's just a treat to watch. And I was pleasantly surprised when I learned there was a game based on it, even though it's only for the Game Boy Color and not on a console. I'm not sure if any of the insanity would translate, but now that I played the game, I don't think that's much of a missed opportunity. This game is totally bog nuts as it is. First off, I played the side game first where you have to find the rabbit, and I love it for Alice's cute-ass animations alone. That said, the animations are surprisingly fantastic despite the limitations, and the colors just pop. But the most surprising thing is that this game is a pretty well-made puzzle platformer. The level design is solid, the challenge is fairly tough for a kid's game, especially the lizard with the ladder segment. Like, it's kinda cheap and a little confusing at points, but I can forgive it. It's just so fun, and the music is just wacky and energetic. It's certainly much less egregious than Mulan or Dinosaur. Dude, the health bar and pickups are the Mad Hatter hats, and the Cheshire Cat gives you full health if you get every star, though it's not really necessary, lives don't exist, so losing health is hardly a punishment. And the game over screen says, quit and wake up. So that's how much you know this game was made with love. While we still have a few more Game Boy Color games left, I think this might be the best one of the bunch. Definitely give it a shot. I'm not even gonna question why they made this, I'm just gonna enjoy it. Now let's go for another Pooh break. Now I haven't watched the Tigger movie in a long ass time, and I was so young that I barely remember any of it. But I guess someone took the opportunity to make their own Tigger game for the arcade. Take two. Hold on, I need to get my cross. Oh, look at that, a little dude face fucking the floor. That's 2 strikes in a row right there. Okay, you know what? The floor fuckers at least remembered Tiggers hate honey. Take that, Winnie the Pooh and the 100-acre wood for the Game Boy Color, you fucking sham. At least he's a good enough friend to find the stuff for Pooh's party. And it's nice that he helps everyone else with their problems, except Roo. He didn't really need that scarf. You ever thought about making a collect-a-thon in a duty space? Well, Doki Doki wondered that too, because they made it. The level design is a little too simple for anyone past the age of 12. But for a game made for children, it's a fun little scavenger hunt, and it doesn't need to be anything more than that. I wish I had more to say about it. It's just a quaint platformer for kids. Nothing else to it. Oh, look at this, a game for a sequel to the live-action movie I watched as a kid, but I never saw the sequel, and I have no desire to watch it at any point in my life. I loved the original 101 Dalmatians as a kid. The world and characters were just full of life, and holy shit, were they full of goddamn life. Cruella de Vil is a fucking deranged lunatic. Hell, she's even the best part of the live-action remake they made in the 90s. Oh, you thought the live-action crap was a current issue? Au contraire, this was a tumor that lasted for decades. To be fair, it's got a lot more soul than the rest of the movies. A lot of fun dialogue and great slapstick. Well, most of the time. It's almost like they gave a shit with this one. Perish the thought. Okay, now I know all of you were very disappointed that we couldn't talk about the game based on the first live-action movie. So it's really nice how we have 2 versions of this game. Are you super excited? I'm very much not. I got the PlayStation game in a coverless Soul Calibur 5 case from a dying game store. I have no hopes for this. Jesus Christ, were Pete a part of the visual art team? Who the fuck drew this? Oh, never mind, I figured it out. So apparently Cruella wants to sell toys in her image to children? And the toys start to terrorize the... I have no idea how to feel. Was this the plot of the sequel? If so, that's dumb as hell. I'm glad I didn't watch it.
You're right, Dipstick.
Dipstick? I thought his name was Pongo. Oh, that's the name of one of the puppies, and I guess it follows 2 of his kids? I'm not even gonna bother. Not like I'm gonna watch the movie anyway. So what if I told you that this is basically a basic version of Spyro the Dragon? But imagine the bones as gems and the box puppies as the crystallized dragons and you got a dead ringer. But honestly, I'd steer you to Spyro. This game is way too brain dead. I mean, look at poor Jasper here. Poor dude can't understand the concept of fences. Oh wait, that's just in character. The playgrounds you're thrusted in feel empty, barely any enemies or collectibles to find. Even the prospect of enemies flying to the moon after you bark them isn't enough to keep me going. Now for the Game Boy version, it's not really much better. In fact, it's even more brain dead. All you need is a key and there you go. Find the cages and go on with your day. The best thing about this game is guests showing in the splash screen.
If this weren't a video game, I'd be on my way to prison.
That actually got me thinking if the video game that Roger made in the first movie was the actual PC game we didn't play. Oh god, that movie was a commercial, wasn't it? Huh, what a connection. From one movie that ended with a small bit of meta humor to a movie all about meta humor. I absolutely adored The Emperor's New Groove when I was younger. Hell, it might be one of the funnier movies in Disney's catalog, thanks to David Spade and John Goodman being a great buddy duo. And Eartha Kitt and Patrick Warburton are just pitch perfect as a completely contradictory pair of villains. There's not a single dull moment in this movie, though it can feel like it goes a little too fast at points. Can't really be helped considering the development of the movie. So naturally, the game based on it has some massive shoes to fill in the writing department. Oh, the game is giving promise at least. This is made by Argonaut, the guys behind Star Fox and Crocs, so there's some high hopes for this. And damn, this game is smooth, certainly more than Croc 1. Kuzco has plenty of abilities right at the start, from this roll attack to spitting out grape seeds. Stand where the grapes respawn and you can abuse as many rabbits as you wish. Actually, you abuse this little kid a few times as well, and it's funnier every time from the writing alone. Actually, the writing in general is great. I laughed a few times, and it's better with the voice acting. None of the actors came back for this. I'm not really surprised, but you wouldn't have known that. They all sound so alike, except the kids. It's so evident that they pitch corrected them. Hell, the voice for Kuzco would actually voice him in the TV show that came out later. Yeah, they made a show, and it was weird as hell. This game is a keeper. Dare I say it's a hidden gem for the PS1. Good platforming, fun puzzles, funny cronk, it's the full package. Now, the Game Boy version exists in comparison. It's just a decent puzzle platformer that lets you spit into phases to open doors. Honestly, that's all I got out of this. Anyway, back-to-back Argonaut. This one is actually an original story based on Aladdin, though I'm gonna take a guess and say it's based on something from the TV show. Yes, there was a TV show for this as well. They also made TV shows out of The Little Mermaid, Hercules, and Tarzan. And all of them were nothing special if I recall. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I watched Tarzan at all. Sorry, back to Natalie's revenge. So Nancy is trying to resurrect Jafar because he's her brother, and she possesses the guards to kidnap Jasmine and the Sultan. You know, why resurrect Jafar? You seem pretty capable enough, Natasha. Do you think these two ever fucked in the past? I'm not exactly ruling that out. And since Aladdin loves the street life, I suppose, he got to save everyone from the evil Nibbity city with the help of the genie, who calls Al his master, even though this happens after Return of Jafar.
Come on, Al. Open your eyes and smell the hummus.
Ugh, Genie is so unfunny in this game. Robin Williams was sorely missed with this. I mean, he's also missed nowadays, but thinking about that is going to make me depressed, so let's move farther from that. Dan Castellaneta is doing his best, but he isn't Robin, no matter how hard he tries. At least Gilbert Godfrey returned, and it's kind of cute how Iago is the checkpoint bird. Look, Al, I'm helping! He even helps Abu when Aladdin is in prison and the genie gets poofed out of existence after being completely unfunny. Actually, that's a good segue to the game because, damn it, Homer Simpson will not shut the hell up. I get that there's a lot to learn, but I don't need a tutorial every 20 seconds.
Al, you can get a good look around by pressing L1 on the controller. Al, this isn't just any token, it's a genie token! Master, you can draw your sword by pressing triangle.
Al, did you know you can use R2 and L2 to rotate the camera? Hey Al, get your sword ready. There's a guard down there. Press circle to block his attack.
Talking, I can't take it anymore.
And when I say a lot, I mean it. You got swordplay and blocking, which is practically useless. You have the stomp attack that is also rather useless. You got apples you can throw at guards, cardboard Jafars, and of course idle birds. You got a sneaking button in order to grab said apples, you can swing on ropes, and the ability to aim while swinging sucks dick, especially with the jittery ass camera, and you gotta collect stuff like coins, gems, and genie tokens. The coins are rather useless, only found use for them in one level where I had to buy a cake for this guard.
I love cake, thank you, friend.
How are these guys a threat? And those last two are for bonus games. The tokens are used for the slot machine, and the gems... hell, they just shoot you into whatever the fuck they felt like making. Stuff like Aladdin bouncing on clouds to Jasmine riding on a skateboard. Wait, how the... you're supposed to be in jail. Despite all the complications, this is still a rather simple platformer. A little too simple, and the writing and story weren't interesting enough to keep me interested. The only part of the game that made me feel anything was this carpet ride that caused me to bust into so many walls and pillars. One of said pillars was in front of a checkpoint. Thanks, Iago, you piece of shit. Okay, I need to cool down with some high quality music. I made that sound like a Raycon ad. Fun story, I stopped using my last pair because they kept calling my grandmother for some reason, and I got the Samsung bugs because of it. Sad to say, this was a downgrade. Where was I? Oh yeah, the Jungle Book Groove Party. Okay, out of all the Disney movies that turn into a rhythm game, I wouldn't say the Jungle Book would have been my first choice. Like, aside from Bare Necessities and I Wanna Be Like You, the music in that movie isn't really that memorable. So like, what did they do for a rhythm game? Well, just make more music, apparently. Aside from a couple of tracks, I was bopping my head to just about every song. Like, the moment Bagheera started singing is when I knew I was gonna have a good time. I could say Bare Necessities and I Wanna Be Like You were the best songs since they were the OGs, but these are just remixes that match the tempo of the rest of the song list, and they feel different as a result. But songs like Join the Ranks and We Are the Vultures are freaking catchy that I can't really find my personal favorite. Though I can choose the bottom choices. Mood for Food is just as uncomfortable as Ka's original song, and the ending song with the girl I can't be bothered to remember the name of. It's so cringy, it's like a Disney Channel original song. Yeah, fitting, I guess. I don't know what else to say, it's just a DDR clone with power-ups I don't understand, and songs that are pretty fun. I'd probably say this is one of the better games, but it's fairly derivative and I don't play a whole lot of other games that don't involve a blue-haired anime girl. Well, look at that, we came full circle with an actual Snow White game. But I'll be honest, after hearing that earache of a prototype, I'm very worried what this will become. Oh, it's just a scavenger hunt game. Oh, fucking kill me. You know, Snow, we don't have to take hours to reach out to a goddamn butterfly. Let's get a move on. There is this one maze game that is reminiscent to that one scene in the forest, but it's really tacky and the collision is confusing. Also, Snow White looks like a fish. I got nothing else to say, I'm gonna move on. And we're gonna move on to one of Disney's most underrated movies. Atlantis is one of those movies I never watched up until this year, and I have to say, I'm upset that this never became a franchise of any sort. The world building and characters are absolutely phenomenal, and the overall theme of capitalism and clout affecting cultural heritage is increasingly more relevant with each passing day. Maybe it was more adult for most people, but I absolutely adored it, though I wouldn't call it one of my personal favorite Disney movies compared to other people. But Disney seemed to be banking on its success because there are 5 games to look out here. Well, actually 4.5, since the first game has a demo that acts as a prequel to the events of the movie, and therefore the prequel to... well, actually, let's talk about it. So the Trials of Fire box art is giving me straight up Doom vibes, and I gotta say, Milo, you are no Doom guy. Stop making yourself look badass, it's not your style. Holy shit, it's actually a boomer shooter. I mean, it doesn't feel like Doom, it's stiff and slow in comparison. Then I learned that this is played on the Blood 2 engine, which I've heard about, but I've never played. My boomer shooter knowledge starts and ends with Doom 1. Before I talk gameplay though, I really appreciate the original animation at the beginning of the demo. That's wonderful production values for a licensed game, and it's all a great bit of world building. Though it goes downhill when we play as this random nobody, being guided by Rourke and Milo's grandfather. It's got great atmosphere with this Arctic wasteland, and I love the design of the Atlantean zombies? I assume that's what they are. It was hard to fight them at first. My game kind of borked on me, probably because this game is not built for modern tech. But once I was able to shoot my pitiful laser pistol, they were a cinch to take out. The real issue came from the level design. First with this plane that is aimed with the mouse, making it way too slippery, and the ability to speed up makes it even more unruly. Top that up with tight corridors, random magic shots, and the awful fog, and you have a painful flight to suffer through. There's also the titular search for the journal. It was kind of fine at first, then this last bit got me stuck over and over. And those guys just came in and took advantage of that. It wasn't until I was half an hour into the main game that I learned that you could jump. And I could remap the controls as something a little more comfortable, but it didn't leave a fun impression at first. But that leads to the Trials of Fire, which you'd think that would be the title for the demo, but whatever. This is the one that repeats the story of the movie, where you start inside of the Ulysses, which is a pain in the dick by the end of it. And then you control one of the escape pods. Good God, this sucked dick. More so than the plane, this was way more cramped, and the controls are a little more tight, which makes dodging the pillars and shooting the creatures frustrating with mouse controls. The game randomly going out a window didn't help either, but that's more so a problem with having dual monitors. Once we get into Atlantis, it becomes more familiar, but fuck these mantis men, they are annoying as hell. This is also when you learn about different weapons, and it makes things easier for sure, but damn, those noises are getting on my nerves.
Those of you who volunteered to be injected with praying mantis DNA, I've got some good news and some bad news. Bad news is we're postponing those tests indefinitely. Good news is we've got a much better test for you. Fighting an army of mantis men. Pick up a rifle and follow the yellow line. You'll know when the test starts.
The last chapter I played was with the Fireflies, not because I wasn't engaged, though getting lost and bitten constantly wasn't really fun. But the game was becoming a little unstable at this point. Also, it just skips the entire chunk of the movie, like, where the hell did Kita come from? But yeah, I would have liked to see the end of this one, but again, old PC games are not really easy to record. With that said, I should quickly talk about the other PC game, and when I say quickly, I really mean it. This is just a bunch of mini games where you just move around, collect stuff, destroy stuff, nothing really complicated. I'm more so just talking about this out of necessity. Now, onto the console and handheld games, and I wish I had a lot to say about any of these ones. The PlayStation game is just a standard 3D platformer, which isn't what I'd expect for Atlantis. Well, maybe more than the boomer shooter, but I digress. I don't know, something on the lines of Tomb Raider would fit better, and it does have a little bit of that Tomb Raider DNA. But if anything, this is very much a light version of Donkey Kong 64, if you can believe it, where you had to switch between several characters to proceed. It kind of makes sense, since the original movie was very character-focused.
You'll never make it past that first pipe. Stronger characters like Vinny and Milo can push objects.
Oh please, there ain't no way you're stronger than fucking Audrey, you lanky-ass bitch. The level design is kind of a combination of Tomb Raider, and also Resident Evil and Crash Bandicoot? There is a lot of platforming involved, very slow and cumbersome platforming at that. And there's plenty of combat against unnatural creatures, very much like Tomb Raider in that respect. The Resident Evil parallels come from the puzzle solving, right down to combining items for more potent tools. And I certainly used that idea to its fullest. Very much so, clearly. There's quite a lot to collect outside of power-enhancing crystals and random cans of mystery meat. Jesus Christ, Milo, you can just open the chest, you know? There's a lot of normal crystals to collect that will give you an extra life when all of them are collected. Cool. And there are letters that spell Atlantis in the Atlantean font that will give you a movie. Cooler. Okay, the collectathon elements are kind of half-baked, I'll admit that. It's an okay game, but I don't know, I feel like the boomer shooter setup fit the aesthetic more, even if that wasn't too special in practice either. And if you want to hear the purest definition of nothing special, the handheld games. Dude, I have almost nothing to say about these. Like, the Game Boy Color game, it's just a side-scrolling version of the console game with really dickish level design. Like, I quit when I hit this checkpoint between two long stretches of spikes. Thanks, assholes. And why did the soundtrack remind me of Shantae? Oh, well that explains it. And the Game Boy Advance game is not much better, as it's just a bunch of fetch quests and quick jobs. I can't even begin to explain the game any more than that. The only thing I can say is that I bought this game twice on eBay, and both of those copies got lost in the mail, almost as if the game was shipped to the city of Atlantis itself. $16.32 down the river for a game I played 15 minutes on a Steam Deck, and will remember nothing about. Killer. Okay, one last Game Boy Color game to talk about, and would you believe it, it's about Pooh. I'm pretty sure this is a handheld version of Tigger's Honey Hunt, because that's all you kinda do, collect honey. Also, the music sounds like an organ playing at a funeral, and considering Al isn't around to tell you the number of honey pots you collected, it might be his. But forget the dead, I'm just going to look at the spinning honey pots. It's so hypnotizing. Also, I got stuck because I couldn't find any more honey pots, and Winnie the Pooh wouldn't let me progress. Oh joy. Okay, what's now? Oh, fucking kill me. Yay, another Tarzan game, and this time it's for the GameCube, and it's Crash Bandicoot. No, it doesn't just remind me of Crash Bandicoot. The level design is just a straight up hallway. Sure, Tarzan doesn't go Tasmanian Devil, and there aren't any boxes and fruit to collect. Hell, the levels are kinda spacious with barely any collectibles in them. Sure, you got movie reels, baby gorillas you gotta save from cages, bananas that sound like cockroaches when you collect them, and there's spears to use for puzzles and attacking. Eh. But otherwise, this is more or less a Crash clone. And not a very good one. Tarzan is far more slippery on his toes, and half the time you just slide on roots. And in the first half hour, you ride on the river in these annoying-ass auto skiers? And let me tell you, you are going to be screaming your head off with all the slamming into boulders, walls, whirlpools, the works. And all while Rosie O'Donnell screams at you for not saving them. And I'm not getting any closer to you, Turk. Shut up or I'll let you drown. And the level right after is very redundant as you water ski tied to a vulture. And it's honestly worse since you're practically guaranteed to take damage from the damned crocodiles. You also die from algae. I'm sorry? And after this, we get a start to the actual story where you meet photographers that kidnap gorillas for who knows what. I'm not going to wonder why, mostly because this stick isn't interesting in the slightest, and this one bit that's supposed to be automated fucked me over, and I just quit. Good job, Tarzan, you made an even more superficial version of the original story, and no amount of hanging hunters will make me come back to this, if they even exist in the game at all. Now, if you excuse me, I have a party to go to. Yeah, I know it's weird to have two Winnie the Pooh games sandwiching a completely different game, but that's the release order, so get over it. So we got another party game with our silly old bear, and you might think that this would be better than the one on the Game Boy Color. Well, on a technical standpoint, sure, but here's the thing. Yeah, it's a party game made for infants, so really it's not much more exciting. The story is about a group finding a treasure map, and Gopher accidentally takes it while running from bees. And as far as the single player goes, you go forward, play one of only 4 or 5 mini-games, fail at them and see your character look like they looked at Twitter, and hope the scary elephant doesn't poke you in the asshole. I'm not a party game guy, but I can definitely tell you that this isn't exciting in the slightest. It's far too slow, the mini-games repeat to a point where you start to hate Fruit and Bomberman, and you have to collect honeypots in order to gain extra spaces. Yeah, this guy has sucked. Please, no more party games. I'm getting so sick and tired of feeling lonely. But too bad for me, because... well, I'm gonna have to become a lost boy. I know that's a shitty joke. Just run with it for me. Yeah, we got another late tie-in. Technically. Peter Pan Returned to Neverland, a game based on the direct-to-DVD sequel of the original Peter Pan from 1953. Or it can be based on that very movie depending on where you live, apparently. I mean, I think it makes more sense if you just called it Peter Pan, because this game isn't based on either of those movies. Instead of Peter Pan creepily kidnapping 3 children, or Peter Pan creepily kidnapping one of their daughters years later to keep them away from World War II, what was this movie? In this game, you keep Captain Hook from getting a secret piece of treasure. Like, I get why a pirate would want treasure, but considering how unhinged Captain Hook is in the movies, he's just kind of the same, but somehow lesser. I get why he'd tear apart the map so Peter couldn't get the treasure, but splitting it into 4 is not exactly going to keep him away, and your lackeys aren't going to help either. The funny thing is that the game itself is also rather lame. All you do is fly around, making the level design rather worthless. You have a knife attack to defend yourself from pirates, and... well, look at it. All you collect in this game are feathers for... what the fuck?
Here you will find helpful things and some very useful information.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a slave trade for a moment there. And thankfully, this dude actually talks like a normal person instead of acting like whatever they were pulling in the original movie. The shop is pretty nothing, but... huh. I wonder what's in that chest. I take everything back. You're still offensive. Well, even though it was a nothing game, it's better than the GBA game. Seriously, you have a limit to your flight, which would be interesting if the game didn't feel slow, and it made you start out with taking Wendy's kids to Neverland and waiting for ages for these dipshits to follow you. Off-screen them, and they will just stop. Like, guys, Tinkerbell can't keep me going too long. Actually, no, why can't you? You're slacking off, you little bitch. Whoop, she suddenly went missing once we hit Neverland. I'm not taking that back, she's still a fucking bitch. Oh. Okay, maybe I deserve this. Well, with that in mind, I guess we gotta move on, but we're not done with Peter Pan. Now, this is an interesting case. As far as I'm concerned, this is the only European exclusive game that I could find, aside from the NES Beauty and the Beast game, but that's a port. This is completely original. Like, why is that? Like, I know it's not all that uncommon to find North American or Japanese only Disney games, but why is this the exception here? Like, I guess it's because Peter Pan is a English folktale. I don't know. I'm just confused as all. Someone tell me that. At least I believe this is European exclusive. I could only find a European copy, and because of that, I had a bitch of a time getting this to work. I assumed my launch PS3 could play regional copies of PS1 and PS2 games, just like most of the PS3 library, but I was too naive to believe that. So instead, I had to find ways around that, so I hacked the thing, but none of the software would actually allow me to play the game on the discs. So I decided to get this little memory card that allowed you to hack your PS2, but I learned that physical games still wouldn't work, so I had to find ways to take the contents of the disc and play it on the PS2, but no matter what I did, it wasn't going to happen until I found this one piece of software called MPF, and that did the trick. However, I was so exhausted that I decided to play the game on that one PS2 emulator, but the problem is I had to put a BIOS into it. Why is PS2 emulation a pain in the dick? But I got it working. Was it worth it? Kind of. Now, the story is no different than the PS1 games, so nothing to note, except for the fact that Captain Hook actually takes Tinkerbell and takes the magic away from her so that Peter can't use any magic. That's a good idea, but you know, Hook, a good way to make sure Peter doesn't use that magic is to squish the little bitch. It might be a good idea to do something with your face too, like, why is your jaw the only thing moving? Interestingly enough, though, what I discovered is that this isn't the PS1 game on the PS2. This is, funnily enough, another Crash Bandicoot clone, right down to the music. Like, put this music over any Crash Bandicoot game and you got a dead ringer. Only this time you got a knife to kill pirates and take their keys and keep the treasure for yourself, like the little brat you are. This is actually a fun game? I'm not joking, I was having a blast with this, even if I was confined to the keyboard. None of the controllers I wanted to use for this was working for me. The glide is kind of nice to use, and the knife throwing move is kind of fun to use, though if you want to get that treasure, it's about as useful as a wet fart. Also, don't worry about dodging. Even if you get hurt, the enemies spawn health, so there's no point to not stab the motherfuckers in the spleen 7 times. And there's plenty of stuff to find, like bubbles. There's a map piece in each level, a few bottles of pixie dust, and there are some enemies to avoid, like cobras. Didn't know there were cobras in Neverland. Silly little crabs and... Oh, I think they might have made something worse than the Indians. Just look at the skin. This is most definitely a Jinx situation. Okay, this is my peak. I was going to make this a recommendation, but this is so awful that it's worth a skip for this alone. You should be ashamed of yourself, Disney. Let's move on to something a little more tasteful, shall we? And yeah, we finally made it to my favorite Disney movie. I absolutely adore Lilo and Stitch. A story about a broken family being mended by a random alien creature that entered their lives just breaks me, man. With the side arc of Stitch learning to become the very opposite thing he was made to be, just adds more flavor to this story. Sprinkle in some gorgeous Hawaiian backdrops, 2 aliens trying to capture Stitch, and Lilo speaking to me as someone who was a weird autistic kid who may or may not have hurt the other kids. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this movie for me, and it will never be topped. Though Encanto is slowly creeping in the more I watch it. Anyway, what makes it even crazier is that Disney did not have any faith in this movie. Everything about the movie just clashed with the company's values at the time, but you know, despite everything against it, it became one of their biggest franchises. Did they have that hindsight when they made 3 completely different games based on the movie in the span of 2 weeks? Doubt it, but whatever the case, yes, 3 games to talk about. And I did play 2 of them before, but we do have to talk about that one that came first. That, funnier yet, I've never played up until this point. So the Game Boy Advance game starts with Lilo getting kidnapped by space otters, and Stitch has to save her. Excuse me? I mean, this game was probably made without any form of notes, so I'll let it slide, I guess. Oh my god, is this like a Metal Slug game? Holy shit, this is Metal Slug. You're packing a lot of heat, the enemies just do their own thing and flop to the floor. There are grenades that are in the form of pineapples for some reason. You got temporary upgrades to make your weapons more powerful, and the animation is super damn fluid. I do not envy the people who drew every frame of these sprites. This game is pretty fun, though realistically, I am very bad at these kinds of games. Ugh, it also has a password system, which makes running out of lives and continues to be more annoying. Speaking of annoying, I really don't like how there's only one music track, and it's this blinky piano music that quickly gets on my nerves. It's neat regardless, and the fact that everyone at Disney liked it was even more impressive. Even the directors of the movie gave them a signed poster as a thank you. That is high praise right there. As far as the PlayStation game goes, this one is actually based on the movie, so I guess they trusted Blitz Games to translate the movie than Digital Eclipse, even though the latter had a better track record, but I suppose they were more impressed with Little Mermaid 2 instead of Tarzan and Alice on Game Boy Color. Okay, Tarzan I get, but I gotta hand it to Blitz. This is actually kinda solid. Mostly because it's just straight up a Crash Bandicoot clone. Like, Stitch straight up has a spin attack. You collect the equivalent of Wampa Fruit, flowers for Lilo, and coffee for Stitch. I like how the coffee gives Stitch energy to do this crazy super attack. That's kind of fun. There are crates that act like normal and TNT crates, though there are these ring crates that give you health on contact. I guess you couldn't do an Aku Aku substitute for this. That kind of make this a little too hard to stomach. Okay, Lilo does have voodoo powers for some reason, but that's kind of in character, I guess.
My friends need to be punished.
They did create some liberties, like they had these rock golems to fight for some reason. A little weird, and there are some random blocks with Stitch's face on them. I can only suspend my disbelief for so long. Some of the enemies are strange too. I remember this thing from the animated series, but that wasn't close to being a thing yet. What the flying hell is that supposed to be? I'm surprised there was a lot of creative freedom despite being so tied to the source material. Hell, despite being Myrtle at the start, you race her in a street of TNT crates. How daring. Fuck these things though. I swear 90% of the time they just explode on contact instead of waiting to explode, and it makes the race irritating as hell. I spent 30 minutes on this race just because of that fucking luck. This is a high recommendation though, only because Crash Bandicoot is fun, and since it's pretty much Crash Bandicoot, that means this is really fun. I can write. But my friends, we come to a childhood memory of mine. I never owned it, and I only played it once for about 15 minutes, I think. But it really did leave an impression on me. I didn't know anyone with a PlayStation 2 aside from one of my cousins. And when we stayed at their house one time, we did play on it with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. I think that's the one with Dark Maul anyway. And Stitch Experiment 626, a prequel to the movie. It's kind of nuts that this game came out just a couple of days before the movie, so it was kind of neat to get something before the events of the movie before the movie hit. Now, whenever I look back on the game, I remember it being a 3D Metroidvania with an interconnected world and upgrades. Well, what I learned is that, no, the world is not connected whatsoever. It is 100% level-based. You have to collect DNA to progress to later levels, kind of like Banjo-Kazooie. And there's also movie clips, but who really cares about that? There are these squid alien robot things that you can chase around, but all they give you are movie clips, so that kind of sucks. Kind of a shame, it's kind of fun to chase them around before they teleport back. Well, it would be more fun if the control wasn't so loose. Stitch is so fast with very little traction, making precision platforming a pain, and the camera doesn't help either. This camera just does whatever the hell it wants, and you gotta hit that L1 button constantly to keep it back. There are also some tools like this grapple beam that, well, it is super fun to use, you can only use for specific levels. This also includes stuff like a jetpack and special guns like a freeze ray or big gun. That's a way to reference Doom in a kid's game, I suppose. At least those are the only big issues, because overall the game is kinda cool. The idea of playing as a villain is always a fun one, and this takes place well before the movies, so Stitch is just straight up a menace here. Causing a multitude of explosions from canisters, totem poles, crystals possibly made of nitroglycerin. It is pure carnage and I love it. You can even collect more guns for extra damage, making hordes of enemies a piece of cake. Sadly, the shooting is all that's helpful, as everything else from this slow motion move to throwing stuff is as useful as using a bike in water. Even this really cool slow motion slam attack, as fun as it is, seems to be only required for specific enemies like these mutants. Oh, that reminds me of the story, as these mutants are actually made by this gerbil guy who has some beef with Jumba. I thought he was the villain of the TV show, but no, he may look the same with the same shtick, but he's a completely different entity. It is neat how the people that made the show took inspiration from the game, and it's not just the rodent. This one thing, Experiment 621, possibly inspired Leroy years later. Sadly, the events of the game were basically retconned thanks to the series and the DVD sequels. But it's nice how they wanted to include a lot of world building for a movie that was expected to be a bomb, similar to Atlantis, but this time it wasn't a box office failure, so It's a really fun game, definitely cathartic with all the blowy up stuff going around. But I can't help but feel disappointed. I was expecting a 3D Metroidvania, dude, but I guess that'd be a lot more ambitious for a licensed game. Also, Stitch doesn't go into a ball. My memories have failed me. Also unfortunate how the first level's music is eerily similar to Shadow the Hedgehog's menu theme, and it makes me want to take this game, put it back in its case, and throw it into a fire. There are a couple of other PC games I didn't look into, but there's a reason for that. One of them is just a point-and-click game based on the movie's events, and other random stuff like this. And the other is just fucking pinball. What else do you want me to say? If you're gonna make me play pinball on PC, Space Cadet is already a thing, and that costs absolutely nothing. Oh, fuck off, Tarzan. Okay, I'm going to make this quick, and thankfully this is the last Tarzan game to play. So this is more or less the Game Boy Color game from earlier, but the level design is far more forgiving at the expense of it being an underwhelming platformer. It's kind of cool how you can slide on the slopes, and the monkeys acting as checkpoints is cute, but that's all I'll remember from this game. Well, and these walking tiki masks. Can you tell these games were made by white people? Okay, enough of that. Treasure Planet! I've only got a chance to watch this movie once on Disney Channel, and I really enjoyed the clash of alien civilizations, coupled with an old England flair. I loved the dynamics Jim had with Dr. Doppler and John Silver, the latter being one of the most genuine antagonists in any animated movie. But when I watched it back then, the scene where they were trapped into the supernova was too hard to watch for me. Because I was so into astronomy, I learned some really uncomfortable truths about stuff like black holes. My face was beet red with fear seeing Arrow getting swallowed, though at least he wasn't stretched like putty. That would have had me bawling. But watching it in full now, it's a fun ride. Though like Atlantis, I wouldn't call it one of my all-time favorites. There is this robot, Ben. I didn't hate him as much as everyone else, but he does get on my nerves here and there. And it does have a phenomenal ending, probably one of my favorites in Disney. But let's get into those games, starting with the game that came out the same day as that thing. Immediately, the Game Boy Advance version irks me, as the first hour is just us getting the pieces of the confiscated board, which is kind of worthless in the movie. And no, I couldn't even finish it because I got stuck on the last mission. Dude, I got the high jump. I was sure this was the place I needed to use it. Turns out that level is too high, and it's the only place I could find. That's another weird thing. You get a bevy of moves to learn to morph, like moving stuff. Also, why is Morph here? We haven't even met Silver yet. Okay, continuity issues aside, this game is frustrating enough. I'm no stranger to isometric platformers on the GBA, but this is one of the most restrictive. You're committed to any jump with no chance of steering, and it also makes something simple as walking confusing. I keep forgetting what is up and down in this angle. Dude, look at me going nuts. Why the hell does a police station need molten lava and Caesar spikes on the floor? That doesn't include the smaller issues like phasing through raising platforms or getting caught by police in the middle of the camera shifting to an environmental change. Low blow, Copper. Though I guess I can let it slide. They don't seem to know what the hell they're doing. Hell, you can just break their electrical source, and you can take your spoils without... DMI moving a bit, my dude? I need the money. Okay, you don't need it. You are showered with treasure, at least for the beginning. Lives don't really mean anything, which is nice when the whole game feels clunky enough to throw some cheap shots. Game's just kind of below average. I'd rather recommend Spyro or Banjo for your isometric GBA game needs. Don't know why you need that, but I won't judge. Out loud. But even still, the console version on PS1 and 2 are more your speed, especially if you love Jak and Daxter. This is another collectathon, though instead of finding music notes or power stars, you gotta do tasks in order to activate these beacon thingies. But one of the recurring tasks is collecting 100 coins. What a unique concept that everyone will adore. Like the GBA game, you gotta have Morph transform into context-sensitive tools like a hammer or cyborg arms.
You know Morph?
You never met Orf! What the hell is this continuity? The exploration is kinda fun, and the combat is clunky as you'd expect. I like the Jak idea of the eco-energy acting as armor if you're at full health. And I think you get a new health piece if you get enough. I didn't pay attention to that. There was a lot of fun being had here, and then I got to the Solar Surfer bit. Racing is already not my favorite thing in the world, but put a collectibles in the track and you totally make me lose my mind. Doesn't help that the surfer is too stiff to be precise enough, and if you die, and it's very easy to die, these green energy things respawn, meaning you need to collect them again. If lives were a thing, I'd be even more livid, but thankfully they're not. I was thinking of getting better at this, but the PS3 was getting fussy, so I had to stop there. Thankfully, I only have one more PlayStation game to play after this. But before then, we got one more Treasure Planet game, this time for the PC. There were some minigame collections from McDonald's that did have the demo for Battle of oh god. But the one game I had would not play for whatever reason, so I decided to put that to the side. Going to assume they're like the Atlantis game on PC. As for the main game, I was very surprised to learn that it was a sequel. You start off with Jim training as a commander with this one Norwegian dude, and this Mr. Arrow looking guy named Onyx. And they later do a lot of odd jobs while patrolling around. There's a lot of fun lore crafting here, and there are some fun mysteries involving silver. It's a shame the game surrounding it is boring. StarCraft has never been my cup of tea, but I feel like this is even more slower than games like that. Between every good moment, you have to sit through minutes of waiting and staring at novas and deadly meteoroid showers, and that's at its highest speed. Seriously, unless you need a dock, you better not have this game on anything other than the highest setting. Even when you get into some action, the shooting and missiles only shoot when they want to. At least, that's how it feels. And the enemies can just hit you at a faster rate, even if their aim is pretty weak. Just as weak as Jim's speaking voice. Like, even when he's yelling at pirates, he sounds like he doesn't care about the situation. He also looks like he snorted all the crack in the galaxy. Like, God, those eyes are fucking huge. I wish I could say more, but these games are far too slow to grab my attention, and anyone who plays these games, how do you not get bored 10 minutes in? I was so bored that I didn't even process the idea that I had the ability to tow a ship. God, if I didn't have my Switch at my side, I'd quit 20 minutes in. Okay, what else is there? Oh, Piglet's Big Game. I'm not familiar with the movie this is based on, though I'm pretty sure I've watched it in theaters. I don't recall much, though. So in a way, this is pretty much a child-friendly version of Psychonauts, if you can believe that. You go into the dreams of everyone and help with their problems, even though you aren't, it's just in their minds. That's not important. The main objective is to scare heffalumps and woozles to death. I'm serious, you make a Jack Skellington face and everything turns into vials. Those vials do nothing, by the way. You collect cookies in order to learn more faces. I don't know if they're more powerful or if they're just fun novelties. And that includes the GBA game too. Wait, what the everlasting hell is that thing? Oh, it's just Piglet. Does that sprite remind anyone else of Hylix? Okay, maybe it's just me. I love Winnie the Pooh, but these games really do scream, this is exclusively for kids. Not bad in itself, just makes talking about them pretty awkward. Oh, would you look at that? Another sequel I grew up with based on one of my favorite movies. And I absolutely loved rewatching this one in particular. Lion King 1.5 is a comedic tour de force, and every moment kinda makes the original movie even better. The I can't wait to be king sequence always gets me, if it doesn't give me traumatic experiences first. Yeah, I would say a lot more, but I really don't want to spoil it. I love this movie to death. Can't say the same about this, though. Ugh, okay, handheld licensed games rarely get a lot of variety in games genres, so playing a short-ass platformer isn't the disappointing part. The levels are just far too short. There's always 40 bugs to find that will give you a special level with health extensions. Very uninteresting. The sprite work is ugly thanks to them making it look 3D for some reason. And the comedy they try to recreate is bleak. This hyena is having more fun than I am right now. Timon, please stop dancing. We nearly died. Was that really the best Uncle Max I could do? I will admit, once Timon and Pumbaa meet, you start getting levels where you switch between the two, and they both have interesting advantages, like Timon's Digatano, and Pumbaa's Rambi Charge. But even that's not as fun because the camera switching between the two takes ages. It kinda got boring to sit through over time. None of it even resembles the movie's soundtrack. Seriously, Dig a Tunnel and That's All I Need are freaking fire. Why don't you just recreate any of that? Honestly, just watch the movie. I will defend Brother Bear to the death. I know this movie gets a lot of flack, and I won't say it's one of Disney's best or anything, but I've always had a fondness for it. With the first third of the movie being a wholesome look at an Alaskan tribe's traditions, and the final third being an emotional reconciliation with both the brothers and his adopted bear brother after learning his place in the world. Yes, the second act is rather weak and arguably juvenile in comparison, and the Phil Collins music does ruin some crucial moments. Thank you to whoever thought that was a good idea. But I can ignore it for such a gorgeous, mature, and exotic movie. Though I will say the ending is a little corny. Like, really? We're gonna do this? I don't know. Anyway, the same developers of Lion King 1.5 returns for the GBA game. And I gotta say, it's certainly just as lively to look at. Funnily enough, I get a lot of Crash GBA vibes here. Not just because they're from the same devs, but with the 3D look, these stumps acting like bounce crates, these totems that I guess are crystal variants, they're not as important, I'll say that. But unlike those games, this game is brain dead to high heaven. The level design is bare. Oh, shut up. And while you get the ability to switch between characters, it's not even close to as interesting as Lion King 1.5. Like, climbing, and belly flopping, and the level where you're together, you get this balancing act. Is it fair to move on? Yeah, I'm just gonna move on. Now for the PC game, good news! I was able to get this one working better than the other physical PC games. Even better news!
Older brother said,
Hold on, give me a second.
was the only one who came back
this
out
is a
again.
sad story, eh?
This is pure art. Oh my god, I think Kenai is possessed. Aside from the weird-ass side effects, this is a fairly decent adventure collectathon. While the controls can be a little slippery, keyboard controls for a platformer always kind of feel clunky. I can't lie and say the movement isn't fun to experiment with, thank you modern technology. And hell, this little sliding minigame is pretty fun. It's no Mario 64, but it's cute. Fair to say that this is the best PC game out of the lot. Certainly a good way to end the PC games. At least if you want a good laugh, I don't know. Okay, why the hell did the DVD sequel of 101 Dalmatians get a video game, but not the original movie? No, that doesn't count. Well, maybe it counts. Whatever the case. I never watched Patch's London Adventures, so I wanted to watch it before playing this, since everyone says it's the best of the DVD sequels, and yeah, it's pretty good. I think the Lion King movies, The King of Thieves, and Lilo and Stitch 2 are better, but this is still a sweet little film, with Patch bonding with his hero, and that hero showing some genuine care for the pup. Also, Jason Alexander as the villain is just a treat. I can't get enough of his voice. Most of the time. Also, God, how the hell did they make Cruella more deranged than she already is? Skinning puppies to make an art piece? Like, Jesus Christ. So you know what? Maybe there's something to look forward to. Never mind, this is gonna blow. Why does Patch look like one of those robotic dogs from Tigger? Fun fact, I actually used to sleep with one of those things. I was an odd kid. The plot is just Patch wants to try and find his family, even though the point of the movie was that he didn't feel like he belonged, so he went to audition for Thunderbolts. And yeah, there's also no Thunderbolt as far as I'm concerned, but whatever, license stick. At least the game is fun, right? No, not really. You collect stuff, you can jump, dig for biscuits, but it's not really a platformer, not much of an adventure either. I guess the correct term would be baby's first video game, I guess. Maybe their first Sonic adventure. Look at him doing that little spin dash. Even the animals you take out spin into the sky like a time-traveling hedgehog. Who decided on this? Yeah, I got nothing. Let's move on. Fuck. Okay, so does anyone remember Home in the Range? I swear I watched this movie a million times as a kid, and I remember absolutely none of it. It was pretty, but that was kind of it. Hell, this movie was so forgettable that they were making a game for consoles and they just trashed it. They knew this was gonna be a fucking dump. But the Game Boy Advance survived, so we gotta talk about it. So do you want to play Final Fight as a horse? Do you want to play a basic platformer as a goat? Do you want to play whatever the hell this is supposed to be? Get medical help. This is the most boring action game I've ever had the displeasure of playing. All you do is mash buttons in the beat-em-up stages and just go right in the platformer stages. This isn't even based on the movie. This is yet another goddamn sequel, which was the most shocking thing about it. Why put the effort in making a new story based on Home on the Range of all movies? Forgettable ass game, I'm not fucking playing any more of this bullshit. Okay, this one is the only game based on the TV show to my knowledge. I watched the series when I was young. I adored the shit out of it. I would watch the show again, but then I remembered that there were some things that made me not want to go back. I will say the save file icons being the various experiments is kind of cute. I'm not picking you. So I was expecting this to be like the Metal Slug clone on the Game Boy, but it actually feels more like a Mega Man game. Kind of. You collect the experiments over the course of the game, and you can use their powers either to make the level easier or for puzzle solving. You don't really need them for Stips, he's capable enough with his blasters. You got the upgrades from the Metal Slug game, you got these bombs that look like they belong in a jewelry store, and you have a double jump. Not sure that was needed, but whatever. There's also the stages with Lilo, and I have to admit, these really suck. Playing as a little girl that has no weapons or powers in an action game destroys the pace severely, and even Experiment 523 isn't that much better. You have to aim down to even freeze the water, and that's just clumsy. He is also just as glacially slow as Lilo, so I guess that makes it consistent, I guess? Yeah, these levels are just a slog, and as okay as the Stitch levels are, I think I played enough to know that there are other games like this that are way more worth my time. Are you getting sick of Pooh yet? Too bad we got Winnie the Pooh's Rumbly Tumbly Adventure. Let's start with the GB... Oh god. Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, cuddly little cubby that thirsts for blood. Thank god the age of pre-rendered sprites is over. So this is pretty much the Piglet game, except instead of entering dreams, you just enter Pooh's memories, which is far less fun, but this is for stupid little toddlers, so I'll leave it be. And the worst part is that the console game is more or less the same as the console version of Piglet 2. The two differences is that instead of scaring the heffalumps and woozles with faces, you just pop balloons, which is actually a lot more stressful. And they also changed the look of the objects that store the collectibles. In this case, honeypots. Go figure. You actually see a slight glow to them, even though they glow so little it's practically pointless. Is this game better than Piglet's big game, though? No. That's just the same game in its execution. Pick your poison if you're at all curious, but even if you are, I'd rather you drink poison because at least you'll have a story to tell at the ball. Ooh, speaking of balls, I'm never saying that again. We have Disney's version of Cinderella. This is another movie I watched a ton, and honestly, I still really like this movie, as long as I stay to the side. Cinderella's struggles with dealing with her abusive stepfamily is devastating, and seeing her get her reward for all the abuse is just heartwarming. I wish the prince had more personality and had more chemistry with Cinderella, but that's where Twist in Time comes in. That movie is nuts as hell, I love it. Shame that movie came out 2 years after this, because it would have been a treat. Instead, you got a 2D walking simulator where you feed horses and collect apples just to open doors. You also got to avoid chickens and rodents for some damn reason, as if they want to trip Cinderella just to do unspeakable things. It's something interesting, just something for little girls to play when their parents are too ignorant to understand they'll enjoy stuff like Mario Advance or Frogger 2. Hell, I would have given them Chicken Little for the GBA as a better experience. Oh boy, we're here at last, the infamous movie of the lot. My only memories with this thing were watching it on car trips thanks to those bands with DVD players. It was like a dream for parents. Not for us, though. We got to experience worlds inhabiting assholes and abusive fathers that believe their children deserve to suffer in Arkham Asylum. This movie is straight up awful, but if you ask me, it's the fascinating kind of awful, especially when you look into what it could have been. How did we get 2 games back-to-back based on movies about abusive parents? That is some crazy coincident chicanery right there. Getting into the games, let's start with the Game Boy Advance version. Wait, is Netherlands the name of the language? Yeah, screw it, I'll pick that. Might make the story more engaging. So this is no different than any standard 2D platformer. You can jump and interact with your yo-yo, and you can even kill the paparazzi. Like, this isn't simple incapacitation. You straight up detonate the camera in front of their faces. You thought KFC stood for Kentucky Fried Chicken, but little Cluck over here is trying to make it stand for Kill the Foreign Cameraman. But outside of that and the parts where you turn into a buff chicken with paper pants, there's nothing really to add. It's just a dull platformer with various things to do for cheap variety. Overwinning? I thought that was abysmal. Oh, speaking of abysmal, the console game. Part of why I say that is because I played this with mouse and keyboard. Yes, I played the PC version because it was convenient. There was a controller option, but it was only for Xbox 360, and I didn't want to get up and grab mine. So the controls make the precise platforming infuriating, if the constant complaining towards acorns and fourth wall breaks that rival any space debris didn't put you off. Like, the second level has you collecting coins for a soda pop, and these things are all over the place, even in places where it seems impossible to access. Save my game. What the hell did I press? Okay, it won't let me continue unless I save, so I'm in the next level. Did the game seriously have enough of me? Look, don't blame my performance just because you're barely competent, game. The level afterward is the standard auto-running hallway level, and then you got a dodgeball game where you're the only person that can take multiple hits, the cheating little bastard. And then you have the standard Crash Bandicoot runs towards the camera level. Why are there so many Crash references in these games? This was the last straw, because the design does not complement the format, and I got assaulted more than should be allowed. Though considering the universe where teams are formed by popularity and baseball games are the only way to your emotionally abusive father, it's probably not that surprising, actually. There are some games before this, but I want to talk about this one first, since we're still on the topic of Chicken Little. Also, trying to map the 360 controller was such a pain in the ass. I was only able to play through the first level because nothing happened in the second level. PC gaming my ass. Ace in Action is an in-universe tie-in game for that in-universe movie at the end of the real movie. That sentence hurt me so much. I also just called it a real movie. The characters are even playing the game in-game. And I'd find that charming if it wasn't the universe of Chicken Goddamn Little. The game is a third-person platformer shooter, and I'll be honest, I was kinda having fun with it. Sadly, I got cut off thanks to the controller issues, but the controls are tight, and the dialogue, outside of the nerd commentary, actually got a few chuckles out of me. Take those compliments what you can, cluck. Honestly, it's kind of weird shooting these robots with the trigger button. Like, that just seems wrong, honestly. Yeah, not much to add. It's decent. Just wish I could play a little more of it. Oh well, let's move on to the Little Mermaid shit. Out of the Ocean Blue, we got 2 separate games based on the original movie. Not the third movie. Yes, there was a third movie, and that didn't happen until 2 years later. 2 years later for Underwater Footloose. Yeah. Thankfully, we don't have to talk about that shit. Instead, let's talk about... shit. Ugh, there's not a lot here. The Game Boy Advance game is just a bunch of random games, starting with a scavenger hunt, followed up with a race against the clock, a rhythm game that requires no timing whatsoever, to 2D Superman 64, to a platformer saving crabs and solid snaking to whatever this is, and ending with wild guns with a harpoon. 30 minutes of whatever the hell happens, and non-stop breaks probably to stretch out the game. Useless ass piece of shit, so let's move on to the DS game. I got even less to say here. Thankfully, it's more focused, but that focus is a boring scavenger hunt with a whole lot of touchscreen chicanery and singing into the microphone. Yes, I said singing. These chests require you to sing in order to open them, and blowing into the mic is not an option. Neither is yelling. I'm not a terrible singer, but I was trying not to wake people up at 3 in the morning, so it could not pick up my voice most of the time. The touchscreen is used alongside the typical controls, and that is clumsy as hell. And sometimes it becomes completely hectic, like with these jellyfish, or it could not register at all. I am rubbing as hard as I can, and the cage refuses to snap. Surprised to say, another worthless addition to the collection. Probably to scam the little girls who got their new Nintendo DS and had no access to New Super Mario Bros. Or Nintendogs. Why do parents hate their kids? Okay, now we get what is, in my opinion, one of Disney's most underappreciated movies. I actually watched Meet the Robinsons in theaters, and ever since it's been a movie I think about every so often. The villain was the highlight. Every word that comes from his mouth just sends me into hysterics. The overall message is also nice, as someone who always second guesses every idea in his mind. I seriously need to look through any animation ideas after this. Here's the thing with the tie-in games. None of them feel like they're trying to copy the narrative. In fact, the GBA game is another goddamn sequel. Doris is just recovered from the dead for some reason, and she invades the present day just as Lewis is about to live his new life. The premise sounds dumb enough, but everything is derivative of the movie, and for God's sake, you have to fight the dinosaur again with the big head and little arms. And just like Bowler Hat Guy, the writers really didn't think this through. Outside of that, the game is just a puzzle-heavy version of Zombies Ate My Neighbors. You gotta find stuff to make gadgets as well as save any people in the stages. It's fine, but I find no reason to go through any of this. Now, for the DS and console versions, that does follow the plot of the movie I think. Unfortunately, you have to deal with this prologue where you have to do odd jobs for the family, and it gets so tiring having to find teeth and collect blobby aliens. I just want to take down the Waluigi cosplayer, god damn it. I was so blue-balled in the DS version, finally getting past the boring shit. However, Wilbur knocks down the fire ant farm in the science fair, and now we have to fight these mutant warrior ants in the future. I'm gonna take a shot and say that's not exactly how time works in this universe. The butterfly effect isn't that potent. Yeah, you play as Wilbur while building gadgets to solve puzzles and fight in the DS version's case. Didn't play enough of the console game to check that one. That version does have you completely dismantle almost every piece of furniture, and that was kind of fun. Shame I could not figure out how to get to this platform for the path I need to build a second contraption, so I kind of gave up on that. Also gave up on the DS version when the game told me to build something in the save station, only for nothing to happen. Maybe I missed something, but suffice to say, that was a sign I should move on. I do want to share this anecdote before I end the segment, though. The power got cut off right in the middle of the climax, and the little red emergency lights in the ceiling made me believe the bowler hats escaped the movie. Gotta love the 12-year-old imagination. Now, Bolts is a weird movie. I've watched it a few times, as it was one of the few movies we had on DVD. I liked it fine. The idea of a dog thinking the show he's in is real life is questionable, even though the studio's ratings dropping makes some kind of sense when you do only one take. I don't know any one person who does an entire project in one shot, let alone an entire studio. Other than that, Bolt is kind of annoying until the point where he drops the hero shtick. The cat is kind of okay, the hamster was tolerable, the road trip is fine, the music is... music. It's nothing offensive, but also nothing special. So I am glad that they do not adapt the movie into a video game. The cool thing about the Bolt game is that it's actually an episode of the in-universe TV show, and it's nothing novel. It's rather schlocky Saturday morning fare, but I kind of enjoy the premise. The game models could look less ugly, like Jesus. Penny looks like she got 2 black eyes, and Bolt looks like he was getting beat at the pound. And those physics. I get that this is low budget, but some of the throws Bolt does is a little on the uncanny side. Pretty sure flight isn't one of his superpowers, guys. I do like the ragdolls though, and the collision in the environments can be a treat to discover. Like, come on, are you seeing this shit, Pac-Man? Oh yeah, as you can guess, this is a beat-em-up platformer, and well, 90% of it is just mashing one button until the guys fall to the ground. It is satisfying doing a ground pound or a super bark to launch enemies back, though it's a little annoying for puzzles since all the cool stuff costs energy for some reason, which is the exact reason why you stick to one button so you don't have to wait for the meter to rise up. That really does suck, especially in the mandatory segments. Not here, I just completely ignored the prompt on that one. Don't blame me, blame the pillar for taking too long. But you don't just do combat with bolts. Hell, you start the game with Penny in the stealth section, and I'll be honest, I prefer these sections. It's kind of fun trying to sneak around guards, use smoke bombs on faraway targets, and even do a few stealth kills. And I mean kills. That man is totally scraped and bloodied from the rocks below. Oh, the Steam page actually makes sense now. I really appreciate the enhanced vision too. Makes the bleak environments less intrusive. Plus it helps with the whole spy thriller vibe. I like it. The only thing the DS version has differently over the console version is this one basic, though unsatisfying, hacking minigame. The console version has something like that too, but this one's just... yeah, it's on the DS. You had to have touch controls, I guess. Otherwise, it's the same game with a different camera angle. That's a little too claustrophobic, if you ask me. Okay, Bolt isn't a hidden gem or anything. It is a little too repetitive to get too much enjoyment from. But I can't say I hated it. I've played a lot worse for this marathon of trash. And speaking of which, there's the equivalent exchange. I only remember watching Princess and the Frog once in high school as a send-off for the freshman year. And if I recall correctly, we didn't even finish it. I think we actually stopped at the part where Tiana turns into a frog. I could excuse Kuzco and Kenai turning into animals. They needed to learn a lesson from those experiences. And Naveen in the movie also needed to learn not to be a lazy bitch from this, but turning Tiana into a frog was kind of a fuck you to the POC community. A part of me does want to believe that white people are too boring to ever turn into animals. Like, look into any non-white culture. It's all about animals and turning into animals. Whereas white culture is just trying to drown all that culture out. Probably out of jealousy. Seriously, who doesn't want to be Beast Boy? I want to be Beast Boy. Who want to be Robin? Fuck Robin. Not important. That being said, this movie is still a delight. I love Tiana and Naveen learning from each other and going on this journey to become human again. And the side cast is just fantastic. Mama Odie and Louis are just a blast to see on screen, and I have nothing to say about Dr. Facilier that others haven't said already. He's just one of the best Disney villains with his soft-spoken, mysterious conman persona. It's just a sweet movie. Shame it was the last of the 2D animated movies, aside from one we'll get to. But what do we have for our game? Well, first thing you see is that it's another goddamn sequel! Kind of. You experience stuff in the past, stuff that are reminiscent to the movie, except Deanna wears a dress while working her job. What the hell are you thinking, Deanna? Well, whatever the case, the first story revolves around her first job where you have to do some cooking, baking, and throwing a ton of bayonets at customers. I did not throw that one. Why is... Oh god, this is a party game. Why is this a party game? This just fucks up the continuity. Yeah, you make the gumbo yourself, Naveen, you piece of shit. Can I get away with saying this is the worst party game I've ever played? This is just aim at shit, shake when prompted, all the standard crap you expect from a Wii party game. Well, I played this on PC, but, you know, shame steal. I got nothing else. I'm just gonna be happy I didn't get to the frog section. The DS game is also a minigame collection, but the games this time are more lifeless than the PC game. Hell, I didn't even try with this one. There is a platforming section, if you want to consider it one, but what you see is nothing other games can't do better. Hell, most of the 2D platformers I talked about earlier are more substantial. Last Lilo and Stitch game of the video, and to my surprise, this is actually based on the anime sequel series, which I've never watched. In fact, after the original series, I just shied away from everything else Lilo and Stitch. And god, there are a lot of spin-offs, the aforementioned anime, the Chinese cartoon, a comic called Stitch and the Samurai, whatever the hell that means, some children's books named Agent Stitch, and there's gonna be a sequel comic to the original movie by Dynamite, which is a neat thing to see. There's also the live-action remake coming soon, and I'm very scared. The reason why I listed all of that instead of talking about the game is because there's not really a lot to say about Stitch Jam. This is a rhythm game, kind of in the style of Harmonite if anyone played that. It's cute, but also very lax. This is probably the easiest rhythm game I've ever played, and that's even with music that's rather forgettable. It's nice to see some of the experiments, seeing them do stuff they did in the show, but that's all I can really say. There is a sequel game that only released in Japan, but I'll just skip it. I doubt it's much different than this one. Okay, I was flabbergasted when I saw there was a video game adaptation of the live-action Alice in Wonderland. I never watched this movie. All I know is that it's kind of a sequel to the original story, and Johnny Depp was the Mad Hatter, meaning he may have been the only good part of the movie. So this game's objective is to get me interested in watching it. Oh god, this frame rate. The overall gloomy atmosphere looks grimy, and I really don't like it. I also really don't like the overuse of the whole, is this the real Alice crap? It makes the story feel repetitive. The game itself doesn't do a lot of favors either. It's cool that you have multiple characters, but as far as I can see, the only difference between them is one ability each. If you need time manipulation, use McTwisp. That's a dumbass name. You want to use telekinesis? Use hair. What, did they use all their creativity on McTwisp and whatever the hell her name was? But in terms of combat, you just bash them on the head, whether it be a pocket watch or a rapier. It all works, and you're not even gonna get hit. Like, I almost guarantee it. This is so fucking mindless. You know, I'm kind of glad that the Dalmatians games are a lot more loose in the translation. They had nothing to do with the live-action movies, but at the very least they were interesting. Here they tried to make it one-to-one, and it looks bad. Why do developers want to make video games from live-action movies anyway? Interestingly enough, when I played the DS game, I had the pleasure to learn that it was not only a completely different game, but the overall style was a complete 180 compared to the gritty realism of the console game. I love this overly cartoonish style with these thick lines, making the pretty fucked up world even more deranged thanks to the derpy character designs. It also kind of makes it a hell of a lot more charming, which, you know, is something that should be appreciated. The minimal voice acting makes me chuckle every time it happens as well. You even hear Alice gasp when you fall into a pit of spikes, and that's just kinda cute. But while the presentation is completely different, the gameplay is both different from and also just as monotonous as the console game. You're using the stylus for 90% of the game, and frankly, it makes combat and movement clumsy. Look, I am trying to dodge roll here, but whatever his name is just sits with his shield out. I do like the exploration, and once you get you can use this mist to defy gravity and fight what might be the coolest idea for a first boss. I kinda wanted to play more of this, but I'm getting so tired I want to sleep, damn it. Next up we have Tangled, and you wouldn't believe that I didn't watch this movie until earlier this year. And boy am I disappointed I never watched it before then. It was kind of a return to the Renaissance era. I mean, so was Princess and the Frog to be fair, but that was just a lesser Beauty and the Beast for me. While this was a better Little Mermaid. I like Rapunzel being this naive shut-in that looks at the good in everybody. And Flynn is a great foil with some snark, wit, and even a sweet little backstory. Maximus is a no-nonsense bounty horse that is just a joy to watch, and the side cast is just wonderful. Not a single character I find annoying or filler. Well, my only issue with the movie is Mother Gothel. She's just kind of Frollo without much of the presence, and she doesn't really do a whole lot, mostly thanks to Rapunzel and Flynn being out of the tower to be fair. Still, even with that, I can say wholeheartedly this is one of my favorite Disney movies. And I can confirm the game does mirror the story beats, and I do love the painterly styled cutscenes, though I don't like the lips. They look like fish lips to me, and just... eh. The game still looks fine. It's vibrant. The models are pretty accurate to the movie, the animation, and I really like the visual effects, like the glow from Rapunzel's hair when she spins. It's very pretty. But the looks are kind of the only positive. The characters seem to never shut up, thanks to the context-sensitive areas always tied to a random quote. I can only hear, "I can swing across," or "This is a job for Flynn Rider," before I go clinically insane. The combat is also just as repetitive as the last few action games we played, and the two-character puzzle stuff is so bare bones. Like, you have Flynn climbing Rapunzel's hair more than Flynn helps out Rapunzel aside from the standard slashing a brush. I can see this being a fine game for couples or something, but as a single-player experience, it's a little dull. Especially when controller support isn't a thing unless you have a second player. I wish I had a lot to say on the DS game, but dude, there's almost nothing to say. You walk around and you do a few mini-games with touch controls. That's it, and it's kinda dull. The art style is... something, I think? But, yeah, this does nothing for me. How can anyone find touching stuff for no reason any fun? Oh, we got a point-and-click game with Winnie the Pooh. Statement still stands. Yeah, not much to talk about here. This is literally the 2011 movie adapted into a video storybook. It's cute, but not really the best way to experience the movie, especially when Pooh Bear and the narrator are the only characters that are voiced. Now that I think about it, this might actually be the most worthless game I've talked about in the entire video. Funny that. Oh, here we go. Wreck-It Ralph is, and I'm saying this without any hyperbole, one of Disney's best movies. This story is beyond incredible, with a guy in a rut feeling like he's being treated with disrespect and tries to prove himself despite breaking the rules to a point where his game is being unplugged. The stakes are far higher than you would ever expect when the setting is literally just a video game. Add in a little girl that is also being torn down, and the bad guy trying to help her becoming a racer, it's powerful. God, it's seriously amazing when it really shouldn't have worked. Also, King Candy is a delight. I wish this wasn't the last good villain since. Now, with a movie based on a video game, you'd think that it would be a great opportunity to make this movie into a good video game. No, absolutely not. In fact, this might actually be the worst of the lot. Worse than the Amiga Era games, worse than Fantasia, worse than the Beauty and the Beast games on Genesis, worse than Pinocchio, worse than Mulan, Hercules, and Dinosaur on Game Boy. Hell, this is probably the worst licensed game on any home console since the Atari 2600. It's kinda cute how Ralph and Felix do the Mario pose when they jump, but that's the only bit of charm this pilot Bonnet can give. First off, this is yet another sequel game, god fucking damn it! Where the alien bugs invade the arcade yet again because one egg got loose, I guess. God, those models seriously look worse than a 3D model from a beginning hobbyist. If these are the models for the playable characters, I'm glad they either made an 8-bit filter or maybe the Wii is hiding the ugliness, because Felix looks like he got fucking lobotomized and Ralph looks like he snorted all of the white pixels. The voice actors are seriously just phoning it in. Like, John C. Reilly seems to peak in a lot of his recordings as if he was recording at home, and I'm pretty sure Sarah Silverman and James Litch's lines were ripped straight from the movie. And get this, they control even worse! They feel so lightweight. Felix's double jump is just abysmal with his ability to fix stuff barely helpful, mostly because the slippery controls make me fall into the hazards before I get a chance to fix them. Ralph himself is slow as dick, and his abilities feel like they shouldn't even be exclusive to him. Seriously, why can't Felix climb? Why can't Felix climb? Who decided to have Ralph scream his fucking ass off when he fails to get off a fucking ladder? And... what? Why are the hitboxes active? I wanted to cheese this stupid crushing hallway because the space is far too tight for my liking, but even going over the stupid concrete will hurt you like the stuff is covered in corrosive fucking acid. Yeah, I think this is it. I've got 3 more games left. I just want this done. The only thing I found interesting about this game wasn't even in the game itself. The first copy I bought on eBay had this Korean CD instead of the game. This is certainly a better bang for my buck than the actual game. Did I mention the music in Wreck-It Ralph Strange on the eardrums? I will never complain about Jun Sonoe's Genesis music ever again. Okay. Let's just chill out for a bit. That wasn't intentional. Okay, so who likes Frozen? I don't really mind the movie. I wish they went along with Elsa becoming the goth queen villain that she was meant to be, but I guess bland-ass Ice Queen is fine enough. Anna's kind of fun, even though she's just another Rapunzel. Kristoff is fun, even though he's just another Flynn. Olaf is actually kind of funny and delightful in the movie. Probably don't like him enough to play as him in a boring platformer where you can't get hurt, and all you do is collect flowers and snowflakes, but, you know, he's still neat in the movie. I like the part where he gets impaled. But yeah, I got nothing to say about this thing. I'm surprised it was a $30 retail release instead of an eShop exclusive for half that. I could say it was a good palate cleanser from that lake of diarrhea. That's all the real praise I can give it. I wish I could get Fantasia Music Evolved working, but like I said earlier, my Xbox 360 won't play any game without updating. But no matter what I do, I can't get this thing updated. Not online or from a flash drive. Kinda sucks, I was genuinely curious about this rhythm game on the Kinect. Maybe another day. Nah, screw it, I decided to get another 360, and thankfully, it's actually able to boot up a game, thank God. Time to get myself moving, though with this much room, it's gonna be a little awkward. Yep, not even 5 minutes in, my Xbox is telling me to back off. Asshole. Okay, right off the bat, I love the aesthetic. It's almost like I'm Dean's Taylor tripping on mushrooms. And credit where credit is due, it's much more responsive than I expected. For my first Kinect experience, I'm kind of blown away. Hey, I'm literally back behind a corner, leave me be, alright?
Let's see how you handle something a bit more contemporary.
Wait, what? Yep, we couldn't just stick to the movie soundtrack, or maybe even slap in Fantasia 2000 soundtrack while we're at it. No, they had to get some other music in there. On the one hand, it is nice to play along with Matches in a Bottle by the Police, and there is music from Elton John and Queen, love to see that. But there's a lot of current names at the time, which I guess hasn't aged too badly. Most of them are still relevant to an extent. But when was the last time you heard from the Pokemon? I've never even heard of them. And as much as I love Lady Gaga and the Gorillaz, do they really fit the overall tone of Fantasia? I'd argue not in the slightest. But hey, when the classical music hits, I am invested. But I didn't get farther than the second world. My arms just got way too sore, and the Kinect was occasionally missing a few inputs. Maybe I can come back to this if I'm in the mood to play every Kinect game or whatever. But even then, if I wanted to flail my arms to music, I'd play Hatsumiku VR. Well, once I get my hands on a headset, that is. Those things are pricey little bastards. And to top things off, we have Big Hero 6, Battle in the Bay. Unlike Fantasia Evolved, I had absolutely no expectations going into this, and I was still let down. This has to be one of the most brain-dead beat-em-ups I have ever played in my life. Like, look at this, it shouldn't be possible to get a 4-digit combo, but here you go. What the hell is this balancing? Hero and Wasabi just feel like the same character. TJ Miller just sucks. And Go-Go is great because I can go past every enemy that I don't have to fight, and every enemy I do have to fight, I can just do this. Woo. And then when you get to the boss, it's just impossible. I don't know if I'm hurting it, I don't have any invincibility frames, neither does this motherfucking thing, and I die pretty much in about 10 seconds. Though what exactly was I expecting? It's a cheap tie-in game based on a movie I already didn't care for, and the biggest piece of irony is that Baymax was the best part of the movie, and Baymax is practically almost not here. He just kinda sits around, and honestly, I don't blame him. Honestly, I'm glad they stopped making more games after this. They made mobile games for Zootopia and Moana, but those don't exist, probably because, just like the last few games, they were just rushed garbage for Disney to cash in. That's all Disney does. They just make shit for money instead of actually giving their creatives any time and resources to make any meaningful art. So what do we learn today? Well, there wasn't a single kart racer, so that's a personal plus. The closest thing to racing I found was from Treasure Planet and Hamsterville Havoc, strangely. There were a lot more party games than I expected, though half of them were Winnie the Pooh related. I can certainly say that I expected the worst from these games, and yeah, it started and definitely ends that way. And another 70% of the list were either frustrating, boring, or they just existed. Though I did find a few diamonds in the rough. The Little Mermaid on NES and Game Boy were fun little distractions. Most versions of Aladdin and The Lion King are classics, despite some brutish difficulty. I thought Alice in Wonderland on the Game Boy Color and Emperor's New Groove on the PlayStation 1 were pleasant surprises, same with the Jungle Book Groove Party. The PC Atlantis games are neat just for the genre alone, and the PS1 game is nice if you want something similar to Tomb Raider or Resident Evil. All the Lilo and Stitch games had some surprising quality, except maybe Hamsterville Havoc and Stitch Jam, but I can't say they were terribly awful. And honestly, the biggest surprises were Bolt and Ace in Action. Like, they aren't amazing, but compared to their movies, I got more fun out of them. Even though a good chunk of this stuff I played aren't really worth anyone's time, I think for preservation's sake, Disney should re-release as many of these as possible. I'm surprised they didn't add in the Little Mermaid and the Beauty and the Beast games for the Disney collection. Like, they aren't great, but neither were the Jungle Book games, so that's hardly a point against them. Hell, why not have Fantasia there too? Could have had a whole 16-bit collection here. I'm surprised the PlayStation Hercules is on Steam, but why not the rest of the PlayStation collection? I think a Game Boy collection would be cool, considering there are over 20 of the damn things. It'd be a neat little oddity. I'm also confused how the physical PC games never got Steam ports, or at least have them on GOG. I don't know. Wouldn't it have been funny if, for the 100th anniversary, Disney found every game in their catalog and put everything in one disc? That's never gonna happen, but, you know, it's fun to think about. Whatever the case, though, I'm glad I did this. I'm not doing anything like this ever again. Like, holy shit, this is absolutely miserable, but at least I got a chance to actually find a few hidden gems here and there, despite the fact that most of it was just complete garbage. But I got to play some really cool games on the Super Nintendo. The Lilo and Stitch games were pretty decent, and, you know, at least I got the chance to play one of the worst video games I've ever played in the form of Wreck-It Ralph, and I didn't think I'd ever say that ever. Whatever. I'll get to the Pixar stuff later down the road. Maybe I'll talk about Star Wars or Marvel or whatever the case. I don't know. But whatever the case, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm still trying to figure out if I did, but hey, it was neat. It was a neat experience, and I think that's all that really matters, right? I'm sorry I wasted 2 hours of your life. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. When you wish upon a star, your dreams come true.